Archaeology, Asiatic Society for Social Science Research, New Delhi. Today we have a webinar, and this webinar is co-hosted by the Iran Culture House, Embassy of Iran, New Delhi. So as we all know that India and Iran shares its culture and that date back to the ancient period. So India and Iran had the closest historical ties with India since the days when Aryans moving southwards via Iran became masters of the Aryan. So thus the contact between the two countries go back to the beginning of Indo-Aryan civilization. And today the topics that are highlighted are pretty diverse in nature. So I welcome all of you on board today. So now I request Dr. Muhammad Ali Rabbani, the Cultural Counselor of Iran, New Delhi, to take over the platform.
Good evening, all. I extend my greeting to all the professors and guests present in this meeting. First of all, Station of History and Archaeology, and also Center for Asian Research Study of University of Tehran for their effort in organizing this webinar. Certainly, prominent Iranian and Indian professor will discuss the culture and historical relation between Iran and India today. Fortunately, due to the long history of Iran-Indian relations, a large amount of literature and work on Iranian-Indian relations are related to the history of cultural relations and cultural influence. Therefore, let me briefly mention a few points about the historical example of Iran-India relation and the lesson that can be discussed today. Naturally, part of the relation between nations is based on perception and understanding of historical phenomena and fact from each other. Indeed, the historical knowledge and information of nations from each other is the main resource of description to draw and shape relation with each other, because understanding and knowing history can provide a suitable framework and image for decision making and policy making based on past behavior, and help them to understanding the influence or useless of establishing relationship and its continuation. However, history cannot be stopped, and the pace of change in today's modern world emphasizes the need to use other platforms and capabilities, such as the use of social media and cyber space, which are sometimes attractive and convey a variety of information quickly and briefly. But historical knowledge and literacy can increasingly prevent superficiality, and by combining mind and object and the reproduction of the living world, led to the more realistic understanding of each other. The basis of historical relation between Iran and India is based on creating a positive mental and psychological sense and confidence in the historical part, because the system of human relation between the two countries in history has been based on trust. In the meantime, the contribution of poets, Sufis, and cultural personalities in building trust and understanding has been important. This positive historical image has been able to help to create a consensus on the common cultural component that are the result and achievement of this trust-based and cultural-based interaction. These close and deep ties are organizing on the basis of a common culture, understanding, rather than on the basis of material and commercial need or political interest. Another prominent feature in the historical experience of Iran-India relation has been constructive dialogue and trade with each other, because Iran-India relation in the past have been formed on the basis of a two-way and mutual way. Iranian and Indian poets, mystics, artists, religious scholars, and writers took dialogue seriously as a special human advantage. They saw speaking and listening as the main medium for the transmission of much knowledge and the sharing of other in the development. And this trade was independent of geographical, ethic, and religious consideration have been taken into account, and extremists have played less of a role. Other lesson and teaching related to this historical experience, accepting and understanding another, accepting diversity and difference, recognizing and understanding the trust, is an attempt to gain to deep and broad awareness of other different culture and tradition. Our past has shown that it is possible to be Iranian, but in the land of India, and for his people, it was an anthem or an Indian poem, and in Persian, it's addressed the Iranian audience with love. The main actor in the history of Iranian-Indian interaction were mainly the people. The interactive capacities and acting power of non-governmental organization were more than government institution. Therefore, these relations are more stable and durable, and the share of language and literature in cultural and social relation is decisive. Therefore, in order to develop communication networks between the two nations, they went to a common language that provide their interactively and communication using the capacity of the language, Persian language, in addition to forming a common language of communication, could also help Indian and raising Persian language and reproducing resource, contribute valuable Persian literature and culture. This historical experience teaches us that even today we must use the positive and high potential of the cultural element and historical element, pivot and a strong factor for the sustainable development of a relation between Iran and India. Because even today, dimension, culture and history has a lasting value, and all phenomena, even for political behavior in some way. Even today, the factor of language, poets and literature, mysticism and philosophy, which are considered the pillar of the culture and play an influential role in the formation of common consciousness and way of life, can be as in the past within the common and original moral and cultural values and ideals of the two countries. A certain lasting sense of trust and friendly communication play an important role in the current complex international situation, where extremist approach have led to the formation of relation and international and conflicts, certainly taking advantage of this historical experience and expanding the approach of dialogue and interaction, especially between the cultural elites of the countries can contribute to establishing lasting and effective relationship. It is hoped that such academic meeting will be able to pave the way for the development of comprehensive relationship between the two great nations of Iran and India by rereading the positive experience of the past and history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rabbani.
Yes.
Dr. Pramod, you can take over the session now.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
You are audible.
Yeah. A very good evening to all. Welcome to this very important pivot perspective. As we know, this is crucial webinar because we are discussing the relation between two sovereign national actors, India and Iran, who shares long-lasting legacies of centuries. Relations between India and Iran have been defining with respect to most pivot issues pertaining security, energy, and transport.
The song is the problem.
Yeah.
It seems like there's some technical glitch on this side.
There are several constraints that restrict India's reach into Iran. This webinar focuses on the key areas on which both countries can cooperate
I guess there is some
relationship between India and Iran.
there is some technical glitches. We are not able to hear. Sorry to interrupt.
Is it, am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir, you are audible now. But your voice is breaking in between.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And coming to this, our institute, ASA, which is purely a research initiative based on original research, attempting at catering to the needs of a large number of social scientists engaged in teaching and research at different educational and research institutions across the globe. Which is
I think there is some major issue on his part. So if permitted, Mr. Rabbani, shall we proceed to our session now?
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir, you are audible, but your voice is breaking in between, so we can't hear you properly. So no issues. Maybe we can start with our group
All
one
these
session.
conflicting currents of socio-economic, political, cultural, and psychological issues affecting human lives in the contemporary time. Now coming to this
No, sir is facing really a big issue, so we can, if sir allows.
Yeah.
The major objective, it promotes and quote serves as a forum for exchange of health in the preservation and ecological sources. It also intends to honor social scientists who made substantial establishes a publication division to encourage publication in the field of social science and humanities. To promote and publish original articles in the relevant field of social science, develops the theory and practice of social science domain, and overall, after all, it makes research more scholarly and CHA, which is a constituent component of the broad umbrella organization of ASA, is destined to promote maximum retrievable information from the field within the given content of a well-designed program of research. The basic aim and objective of the Center for Historical History responsibility towards preserving India's common heritage, to protect and preserve India's living, built and natural heritage by undertaking necessary actions and measures. We in CHA document unprotected buildings and archaeological, architectural, historical, and aesthetic significance, as well as the cultural resources. Heritage when necessary. It provides expertise in the field of conservation, restoration, and preservation of specific works of art, and encourage capacity building by developing skills through training programs. With the government and other social, local, national, and international agencies. We in CHA generate sponsorships for conservation and educational projects. Through its educational and outreach initiatives. So on the broad premises of this research are now of the CHA as a promising research initiative has achieved its significant step. Even though there is a break of voice breaking. Thank you. Over to ma'am. Hello.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Pramod. So now, may I request the moderator of Group 1 to start with the session? So do we have Dr. Ghulam Ali Hadad here?
Unfortunately, he's not available. You can start it for another speaker. I think Professor Farzan Lotfi is there for another. Can start. Yeah.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. So since he is the moderator of this session and he'll join us in a while, so we may start with the second presentee of today. So over to Mohan.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And am I audible to all?
Yes, you are.
Yes, so thank you so much for joining us today. For this group one, I would like to introduce and ask Mr. Pratap Chandran Sarat Chandra Panikke, who is an associate professor, Department of Archaeology and Ancient History, Maharaji Sayaji Rao, University of Baroda. So yes, over to you, sir. So we will, without a further ado, we would like to, have you on board. Thank you.
Very good evening to all of you. I suppose I'm audible?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll go straight to the topic as we have very limited time. So I won't just take much of it for any introductions. Let me thank the organization right in the beginning for giving me a chance to talk to all of you. As I have talked to one of your people who called me for this lecture right in the beginning, early few days back, that I don't have, let me confess that I don't have any experience of directly working in Iran with any of the cultures of Iran. My experience of the West Asian region is limited to working in Oman. So I had worked for a few seasons in the Chalcolithic sites of Oman. In between, one thing, when I say Chalcolithic or the technical terms, I don't know the background of the audience here. I don't know whether they would understand some of the technical terms. When I say Chalcolithic, the Copper Age cultures, simply. If you are all archaeologists or related to archaeology, then it's fine. So some of these Copper Age cultures of Oman is what I worked upon. And then during the course of my working over there, I had the chance to actually come across certain relations, certain contacts with the Iranian region from Oman. And then the Omani region in turn had contacts with the what we call as the Harappan civilization or the Indus Valley civilization. And then right up to the Mesopotamian region through the Gulf Sea, the Persian Gulf. So that was learned when I was working over there. Otherwise, as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't have any experience of working directly in Iran. Hopefully, God willing, inshallah, I get a chance sometime in Iran. I would be so happy to go over there and then work on some of the sites. So can I go straight over to the slides? Is the sharing on? The sharing is disabled.
Yes, so we have the host from the Iran side. So may I request them to allow sir to present? Sir, I think you can share now because you have been made.
Yeah. It just came. Can you see that now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'll shift it to the full screen.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to shift it to the full screen. I'm trying to put it to the full screen, basically. So as the title says, it's primarily the Indus Valley civilization of the Indian region and relations with West Asia. Primarily, even though the tentative title which is given in the program is up to the Mauryan period, I don't think I will be talking about all of that because it's a very long time frame. So I'll limit it to primarily the 3rd millennium BC. That's the Indus Valley civilization period. That is where I have worked more, I'm more comfortable with. So I'll shift to that. Is it not going to the full screen? So that's just a title.
Maybe you can try reopening it. It should work.
Yeah, I think, is it full screen now?
Yeah, yes.
Sure. So I'm primarily trying to talk, as I mentioned, about the 3rd millennium BC. That is what's the Indus Valley civilization period in India. That is, as per the Mesopotamian text, what you call as the Meluhan region. And then through what is the Persian Gulf region, where the modern Sultanate of Oman, which is the ancient Meluha. And then further up, you have the Dilmun, which is which is a modern Bahrain region. And then right up to Mesopotamia as the final destination. And then along the way, my studies generally shows that it's not only the southern half of the Persian Gulf, it's the northern half, which is where the modern Iran is. There was quite a lot of influence of these people of the travelers, of the traders, which happened over there. Evidences are all over there. And the picture right here shows a display of the British Museum presently, a model of a ship, which probably those people used. Coated in bitumen, very interestingly, coated in bitumen. The ships, as far as our studies go, of those period, the Arabian ships were reed boats coated with bitumen for waterproofing, and then the source of bitumen is understood is probably that it came from the Iranian region, because that was the primary source where bitumen was available naturally. So the Arabs actually imported the bitumen from there, made their boats, and then ultimately sailed into India from the Arabian region, is what we generally understand. So this is a model, a toy model of that, which was found from excavations and presently in the British Museum. So that's a general map of the region, what is usually called by archaeologists as the MAIS in short. That stands for Middle Asian Interaction Sphere. So the Middle Asian Interaction Sphere, as you can see in the map, includes a very vast region, starting right from Western India, through Pakistan and modern regions, if you like, Western India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and right up to Central Asia in the north, and then up to the Mesopotamian region in the west, including the Arabian regions in the southern region of that. This whole wide region is what is generally called as the MAIS, or the Middle Asian Interaction Sphere. And you have evidences of interaction starting right from 3rd millennium BC in this entire region. Even when I say 3rd millennium BC, keep in mind that that is not actually the earliest. In fact, if you go back to what is called as the early Neolithic, Neolithic is a culture where which started the agriculture, settled way of life, which happened in the Mesopotamian region and then migrated from Mesopotamia through Iran and Afghanistan into Western India. So you have a gradual migration starting from 10,000 BC, and then by around 6,000-7,000 BC, they were into what is modern Western India, modern Pakistan region. It's a Neolithic period. But then all these, the map what shows here now is all the regions which had interaction starting right from these early Mesolithic, that is the early agricultural phase, through Chalcolithic, that's the copperage phase, and then into the Iron Age later, what is in India popularly called as, usually called as the early Vedic period. So the Vedic people, though it's a controversy of who were they, generally believed as Central Asians who migrated into India through the Himalayan passes. So this is the entire region, the Middle Asian Interaction Sphere. All of them had mutual interactions starting for the last many millennia. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the trade from the Indus region, between Indus and Mesopotamia, two of the major regions on either end of that, and then through the Arabian Sea, through the Persian Gulf, going right between these two regions. And then in between comes the Arab nations on the southern half of the Persian Gulf, the northern half, the Iranian territory. So you have materials of the Indus origin, materials of the Mesopotamian origin found in these whole regions, particularly throughout, especially the Indus Valley materials, luxurious materials of demand. You can find them in modern Oman. That's the old Magan, as it is mentioned over there. The Mesopotamian text called them as Magan. And then Dilmun in the modern Bahrain region, and the Indus Valley, that's the Meluhan region. That's the coastal Baluchistan and the Gujarat coast. It's the old Maluh. So that's a trade region, and as the map shows in general, you have the seasonal, the wind directions, starting from what's the usual monsoon over here. That is in, say, starting from May, June till September, the monsoon winds, the southwest monsoon winds, taking the ships right up to Gujarat coast from the Arab regions. And then the northeast monsoon, starting from November to February, taking the ships back because the wind direction changes. So this was utilized by the traders. They used the Persian Gulf. So that's a trade region, and as the map shows in Sequoia. So that went back up to the Mesopotamian region. And then this trade routes actually caused the materials to be traded. You find evidences of quite a few of them. I have few pictures which come up later, which show some of the materials which are found in the Iranian region, in the Magan region, in the Dilmun, right up to Mesopotamian region, what you generally find. And then when you look at the cultures in this phase, in the Meluha region was what is the Indus Valley civilization. In the Magan region, in the Oman region, they have a Chalcolithic to that region, which is what is called as the earliest phase before starting of this trade, is what is called as a Hafid culture, Hafit, Hafid culture, followed by the Ummanar culture. Ummanar is a region in the modern UAE, from which the site was first found. So Ummanar culture, that coincides with, almost contemporary with, the Harappans over on the eastern side and the Mesopotamians over on the western side. That's Ummanar people, who were the primary traders between these two people. And the materials which were taken went up to, across the Persian Gulf, went up to the Iranian region. We have evidences of the findings of these Harappan materials from the Iranian region also, which also had a very wide Chalcolithic culture, copper using culture, which passes through a couple of millennia altogether, more than 2000 years of a copper using culture. So if you look at the Iranian region, you have what is called as a Giroft culture. I suppose my pronunciation is right. The Giroft culture, which is otherwise called as a...
sorry for the interruption, sir. May I request everyone else to keep their mics on mute?
So yes, the Giroft culture, or what is called as the intercultural style, or the Halil Rud culture, which is in Iran, which is dated to the late 3rd millennium BC. So which comes contemporary with the late Hafid and the Ummanar in Magan, and the Meluhan region in the Indus Valley region. That's the Giroft culture. It was an independent Bronze Age civilization of the Iranian region. And then one of the interesting aspects of the Giroft culture is that it shows evidences of inscriptions. We have writings available from this culture, though it is not deciphered. It's still not deciphered, just like the Indus writings, the Indus scripts. The Giroft script is not yet deciphered, but then this is something which I personally feel interested in, because the Mesopotamian is contemporary to the Mesopotamians is the Giroft. And then that actually is found here, which is not deciphered, and you can try to see if there is any kind of a continuity or resemblance which can be utilized for the deciphering of the script. And if it is deciphered, then further coming to east from Iran through Afghanistan to India, was there a connection between the Harappan script and those other scripts over there, which is one interesting aspect, the Giroft culture. And then the pottery of the Giroft culture shows similarity with the Mesopotamians. Early 3rd millennium, late 3rd millennium BC is the Giroft culture. And then yet another Chalcolithic culture of the Iranian territories, what is called as the Helmon culture. The Helmon culture is primarily what is named by Professor Tosi of Italy. He called it as a Helmon culture. 2500 to 1900 BC is the date of this culture, which sits exactly with the date of the mature Harappan phase. So when the mature Harappans was happening over here, the Ummanar culture was happening over in the Oman region. It was a Helmon culture in Iran, which was happening over there, contemporary to Mundigak, period 4, which is a very well-known culture. And then the mature Indus phase is a Helmon culture. There are inscriptions also found from here, continuation. Yet another Chalcolithic culture towards the late 3rd millennium and early 2nd millennium is what is called as the Lulubi culture. Lulubi culture is basically Lulubi, the word.
Sorry for the interruption, sir. Mr. Harish, can you hear us? Mr. Harish, can you hear us? May I request the
I think, sir, you are the host, and please try to mute everyone else.
Yes, sir.
I can do that.
Yes, you can do that.
You can mute Harish ji, since you are the host.
Where is it?
Yes, sir. Harish Venkataram.
Where
So
do
you
I
just-
mute him?
Sir, can you please check the participants area?
Yeah.
Participants at the bottom.
Yeah.
And
I just saw it. I just saw it. What is his
Yes.
name?
Harish Venkataraman.
I simply one H. Hamid.
Harish. His name is Harish Venkataram.
It would be in V.
H, sir. Harish. His first name is Harish.
H, I only have one name. There is one Hamid. After Ghiyasuddin is Indrajit.
Okay.
I don't know who is. Can anyone from Iran side mute this person? Because it is really creating a lot of disturbance.
Harish Venkataraman. Yeah, I just got it.
Yes, sir. Kindly mute him.
Yeah, I just got it. So he was just after my name. No, it was not in the alphabetic order. He was the number 2 in that. I was looking in H.
Okay.
Anyway, I got it anyway. So
Thank you so much.
I suppose that is done. So that was the Jirov culture and the Helmand culture, which is followed by the Lulubi culture, which falls in the end of 3rd millennium BC to early 2nd millennium BC, which Lulubis, by definition, was kind of a highland culture, staying on the hills, more kind of a kind of people who were into revolting, into war, into plunder, which was a characteristic of this Chalcolithic, of this entire region, basically. If you look at the Chalcolithic period, you find starting right from Mesolithic, starting right from Mesopotamia through into Iran, you find a culture which was actually ruled by kings. Kingship was a kind of rule which was happening. Whereas when you come to the Oman region, the Oman culture, they had not kingship, but a kinship. Kings were what was ruling them, not kings. And the same would have been the case in the Indus region. We don't know about the political system of the Indus Valley culture. Whereas it was a kingship and then mutual plundering, mutual war was a kind of culture which was happening over there, which is a variation from the Chalcolithic of the Omani region or the Indus region, with when you take at the Chalcolithic of the Irani region, plundering, war, conquest, which was very common. You generally find evidences of all of these, and then the evidences of kings also, a list of kings which can be seen in Mesopotamian texts. When you look at the Akkadian empire and all, you have a list of kings which continues right from there onwards, right from Mesopotamian region. And a the next region, which we would actually that's a continuation of the same one. The regions which we generally talked of. The next region which we would talk of is what's called as the Elam, which had the capital at Susa. If you can see my cursor over there, closer to Mesopotamia over there. And then this whole region came under the control of the Elam, which was a territory which was ruled by kings, which can also be divided. It ranges through a large time frame, starting from the end of 4th millennium, early 3rd millennium, through into the 1st millennium BC, mid 1st millennium BC. A very fast time frame, the Elam region in the Iranian territory. You have the Proto-Elamite, the Old Elamite, the Middle Elamite, and the New Elamite. You can classify them accordingly. The New Elamite ultimately gives way to the Achaemenid Empire, which comes from the 6th century BC, and then who had an influence into the Mauryan territory in India when they come up in the 4th century BC, the Elam region. And in this Elam region, from Susa, primarily, some of the pictures later will show you that there are evidences of the materials of the Harappans, Harappan origin, carnelian beads, shell bangles, Harappan seals, you find from the Susa region of the Elam territory, 2500 to 1900 BC. That is the old Elamite time frame. 2700 to 1500 is the actual time, but then during the time of the mature Harappans, you find in this region. And then this was followed by other major kingdoms in the Iranian territory, like the Assyrian kingdom, and then further west into the Mesopotamian region, the Akkadian kingdom, all of them primarily contemporary, Chalcolithic of this entire region, if you take in general. As I mentioned, it's difficult to actually summarize it all in a few minutes and in a short time, because you have vast number of kingdoms and territories in the Mesopotamian region, in the Iranian region, further south in the Omani region, though there is no kingship over there, it was kinship, not kingship, in the Omani region, and then coming further into the Harappan territory, where also the political system is something which we do not know. Who ruled them? Was it a king or was there a list of kings? We don't have any idea. But then looking at inscriptions, it would be interesting because the Mesopotamian is red. Coming into the Iranian region, you have inscriptions, not much red. And then further into Afghanistan and India, through Pakistan, the Harappan territory, you don't have the inscriptions deciphered still. So once it is deciphered, it would be interesting to look at the political system. We'll quickly go through the next slide so that I can finish it off soon. I suppose I'm already overshooting into the time. So that's again another a closer picture of the Iranian territory, the empires, the territories which I already told of in the Iranian territory. In the western side of that is the old Mesopotamian region, and then in the Iranian territory, all the early Chalcolithic communities, primarily in the 3rd to 2nd millennium BC, is what is shown over here. And then these are pictures of the typical Harappan seals, round seals basically, though the usual Harappan seals are square, which I'll show you later. The round Harappan seals. On the left side is some of the seals which you see from Mesopotamia and the Bahrain region, primarily showing the trade of the Harappans with Mesopotamians and the Bahrain region. The first and second are found from Mesopotamia. The third is found from the Bahrain region. And then the fourth, I don't know, 3 and 4, both are from the Bahrain region. Whereas the one on the right here is the same circular seal which is found from Iran, Susa particularly. So this was a similar kind with the Harappan script on that, the Harappan writings on that. Though it is not deciphered, we do not know what is written, but then the Harappan seals, which again shows the presence of the Harappan traders, because a seal is primarily an indication of trading. The Harappan traders who came over here. And then these are the actual Harappan seals found from the Harappan context in Gujarat. These are the seals which we found from our department excavations in Kutch or the surrounding regions, all the square seals of the Harappans with the typical Harappan animal motif, what is called as a unicorn, and then the Harappan script on top of that, all the Harappan seals. It's just a general picture, an artist's view of how they would have loaded the boat and then taken out. This is from the local dockyard being showed. I mean, just an artist's view of how the ships would have come in and then was loaded. And then a couple of other depictions of the loaded ships, which are found from the Indus sites. Ships which were loaded, you can even see live birds over there, which would have been traded into the Harappan, into the Western territories. And then some of the materials which were exported, of which the first two, if you notice, the stone beads, particularly carnelian beads, and then shell ornaments, along with the seal which we saw earlier, are found from not only the Oman, Ummana culture, you found from in thousands over there, you also find it from across the Persian Gulf into the Iranian territory, which shows kind of a contact with this, the trading communities who actually passed through the Persian Gulf Sea into the into the Mesopotamian territory. And then all these other materials, some of them perishable, we do not know how much of them actually reached over there, or surviving materials are not there. It's just a general idea of what could have been traded from here. And some of the Harappan pottery, you even find, if you notice the perforated jar over there, which you notice, this was found, I personally have seen myself in the Ummana culture, in the Oman region, shards of those vessels, as well as those painted redware. You have every chance, I suppose, if I get a chance, I would certainly try to check that, or the Iranian archaeologists, if anybody is over here, they would be able to tell it better, that whether you have reports of some of similar kinds of pottery which is found from there, which might have come through the traders of the Indus origin, the perforated vessels and the black on red vessels, which is very commonly found in Oman, in Bahrain, in Mesopotamia. So there is no reason why it should not be there in the Iranian territory. As I said, I don't have a first-hand idea because I have not worked over there. So it should be there is what I believe. I suppose some of the Iranian archaeologists would actually throw more light on that. And then this is the carnelian beads, the long carnelian beads, which were very precious and which were much in demand in Mesopotamia, in Oman. So this is a picture of the Harappan beads from the Omani region. And in the middle, you see a bead with the white etchings on that. These white etchings was a typical characteristic of the mature Harappan beads. The pattern which is etched over here is what is usually commonly called as the eye bead, the eye pattern which is etched on that. So chemical etching which is done on the red carnelian surface. And exactly same kind of beads were found even from Susa in Iran. So this picture is from the Omani region, from the Chalcolithic cultures, the Ummanar culture of Omani region. But then you cross over to the north of the Persian Gulf. This is the beads which were found from Susa, the etched carnelian beads. These were found from Susa, exactly originated in the Indus territory. And then Indus people were actually specialized in making carnelian beads. This rock was available primarily over here in the Indus territories. So this semi-precious stone, so this stone was utilized to make the beads, and then etching again was a kind of a characteristic of the Harappan bead making technology. So these etched beads, you can find the eye bead second from left, the same kind of pattern which is etched in, which was found from Oman region, found from the Susa region also in Iran. And then this is a picture of a shell bangle workshop which we excavated, our department excavated in Gujarat, in the northern Gujarat, close to Kutch region. This was part of the shell bangle workshop. We had around 7,000-8,000 uncut shells, which you see on the top levels over there, segregated. And in the middle in that square was the cut and finished or semi-finished bangles, which were probably put in a wooden box. The wood decomposed, so we got it in that shape when we excavated. And there's some of the other shell bangle materials, which you see over there in that orange background picture. So these shell bangles were also exported, and then this is a shell bangle of the very same type which were found in Gujarat, which probably was exported and found from Susa, the Elam region in Iran. So probably this was another material which was in demand, which was exported, the shell bangles, particularly the shell bangles of Turbinella pyra, which is a local species which you find in the Gulf Sea, the Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat. And then a couple of other species which were utilized. So this was found from Susa. Yet, in addition to the seals which you find, the carnelian beads which you find, the shell bangles, another material which would have been in demand. And then yet another material which you find on the left and right, if you see the group photo, is a photograph of the group of the typical standardized Harappan weights, the cubical stone weights of the Harappans. One of them was found from Susa again. The one on the right which you see is a picture of a cubical weight which was found from Susa in Iran, which is a very typically standardized weight, while Harappan weight system falls into the Harappan weight standards, which again corroborates the kind of relation which they had, the kind of trade relation which they had, which went through not only in the south of the Persian Gulf, but the north of the Persian Gulf also, the weight standards which are followed. And then yet another thing which I don't have a picture of, this is a picture from Oman, northern Oman, the hills on the northern Oman region, which was full of copper deposits. And then the Mesopotamians used the copper deposit from the Omani hills, actually, primarily for their copper source, because Mesopotamia did not have any copper resource available. They imported it from here. So this is from those hills, the Meiser copper mines, northern Oman. Right across the Persian Gulf over there is the Iranian territory, where I understand, where I have read that copper sources are available there too. So it's worth looking into that. I have not looked into that, so I cannot make an expert opinion on that. It's worth looking into that. Again, coming back to the Iranian archaeologists, I would take their help if anybody can help you out there, whether there was this copper sources which was available and then which was exploited by the Mesopotamians and other Chalcolithic, because naturally the Chalcolithic communities, as we mentioned earlier, actually was around 2,000 years long, and then they needed copper resource, and then they would have utilized either the local resource or import. And then being there in Oman, there's every possibility it would have been there across the sea in Iran too, the copper. And then along with, as I mentioned right in the beginning, the bitumen, which was used for waterproofing the boats for the traders. Both would have been, the major source would have been the Iranian territory, along with the copper from Oman too. Bitumen was exclusively Iranian, is what we generally understand. So that was in short, a very short summary. As I mentioned, it's very difficult because we are talking of a time frame of nearly 2,000-3,000 years. It's very difficult to actually summarize, which normally used to go in class where we take a whole year to even give a broad framework of that. And then I have tried my best to actually condense it to within 20-25 minutes. I suppose I have overshot a little bit, so I won't take much more of your time. Thank you all very much for your listening to the talk patiently. Thank you very much once again, and thank the organizers also for the chance to talk to you. Thank you, and over to you, please.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful and insightful, presentation for this lovely session. So next we have Ms. Pratishta Mukherjee. She is the Director, Excavation and Exploration Branch, CHA, and a PhD scholar at Department of Archaeology and Ancient History, Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda. So I would request Ms. Mukherjee to join in, and also I will request Panike sir to make her the host so that she can present her presentation. So please do that, sir.
I have to do that?
Yes, you can just click on the name of Pratishta, there will be you'll be finding 3 dots.
Yeah. Just a minute. Let me open the participants. Pratishta Mukherjee. Yeah. Done.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
So good evening, everyone. Before I start, I would like to thank all the organizations who have given me the chance to talk over my topic today. So today I'll be talking on Indo-Iranian relationship during the Achaemenid era, 560 to 333 BCE. Before I start with my presentation, I would like to quote our late Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, who writes in his book, Discovery of India, among the many people and races who have come in contact with the Indians and influenced India's life and culture, and oldest and persistent have been the Iranians. With the introduction. So, rich in historical background and cultural heritage, India and Iran down the ages have presented several artworks in various fields to the world. And they have so much common in maybe in religion, in mythology, and everything. These people brought with them the patrilineal system, their worship of sky gods, and their tradition, social institutions, everything. So the Indian subcontinent, including the present India and Pakistan with its special geographical conditions, has a deep root in producing the civilization which settled in Punjab and Sindh. The Iranian plateau had also its special characteristic and traces of civilization which was situated in southeast, southeast central part, south element of Iran. The similarities between Indian and Iranian civilization can be seen in Mesopotamia. The archaeological and the historical artifacts can be found from Mesopotamia and its adjoining civilizations. So the Indus people had trade links with the parts of Afghanistan, coastal regions of Iran, and the ancient civilization of Mesopotamia. So the present study focuses on the Indo-Iranian relationship during the Achaemenid era in the context of political, economic, and cultural backgrounds. So I'll just start with the Achaemenid era. The Achaemenid, in Old Persian, it means Hakamanishya, was a dynasty in the ancient Persian Empire with high cultural and economic achievements. At the height of their power around 500 BCE, the Achaemenid rulers of Persia ruled over territories roughly encompassing today's Iran, Iraq, Armenia, Afghanistan, Turkey, Bulgaria, eastern parts of Greece, Egypt, Syria, somewhat of Pakistan, Jordan, Israel, Libya, etc. So it was a great empire and the extent was also very large. I'll just give a small introduction about the Achaemenid Empire, its dynastic background, and the decline. So the founder of the dynasty was supposed to be Achaemenes, from whom which we don't really find any historical background about him. And in Old Persian, he's called Hakamenes, which means of friendly mind. He was succeeded by his son Thespis, who first took the title of king of Anshan after seizing the Anshan city from the Elamites. Inscriptions indicate that Thespis died with 2 of his sons shared the throne as Cyrus, Kurush, and as king of Anshan, and Ira-Ramis, which means Arya-Ramna, meaning having the Iranians at peace, king of Persia, which later been called Persia and later Persia. They were succeeded by the respective sons Cambyses, one of Anshan, and Erasmus. So in 559 BCE, in 559 BCE, Cambyses I the Elder was succeeded as the king of Anshan by his son Cyrus the Great, who also succeeded the kingdoms. Cyrus is considered to be the first king of the Achaemenid dynasty to be called properly. So, as his predecessors were subservient to Media, Cyrus conquered Media, Lydia, and Babylon, and his successors were less efficacious. Cyrus's sons like Cambyses II, who conquered Egypt but died in 522 BC as a result of either accident or suicide during the revolt of the pretending priest Gaumata. He was later succeeded by his son Darius I, and in his inscription, we get the first evidence of. I'm so sorry. So Darius I, in his inscription, Darius is called Darahush and Duryavus, and he's the greatest king of the Achaemenid dynasty. And in his inscriptions, he first mentions Achaemenes as the ancestor of Cyrus and the progenitor of the Achaemenid Empire. The disintegration of the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Empire actually stretched from 650 to 330 BCE. The Achaemenids also ruled Egypt, although the Egyptians twice regained their independence from Persia. The last king was Darius III, who was defeated by Alexander, the king of Macedonia. After the Macedonian conquest, the Persian Empire was annexed. Political relationships with India during the Achaemenid era. So if we just focus on India, Magadha was the first great imperial government in India, which was comprised the Medes government in Iran. Bimbisar became the king and began his political change of Magadha. He obtained many confederates and supporters in northern plateau through several marriage alliances. With the dominance and supremacy, Bimbisar joined the local governments and thus established one of the governments over the northern India. Therefore, he was able to establish relationship with adjacent governments such as Gandhar, located between Iran and India. Maybe Indian ambassadors who reached the court of Iran were sent by this king. Bimbisar was succeeded by Ajatashatru, who developed his father's extensive kingdom. The capital was set up at Rajgriha. In Persian, Rajgriha is called Shah-Nishin. The king's main palace was located centrally, and the city engineers made Rajgriha in such a way that no one was allowed to enter the gates of the city at the night, even the king. Similar traits of this palace is found from Medes, located in Hegmatane in Iran. In addition to these great government in Magadha, there were these, along with Magad, the other Mahajanpads. Political relations between the age of Great Cyrus of Achaemenid. The age of Cyrus is, we can say, as the beginning of the relationship between Iran and India. King Cyrus extended his reign to the east and reached the border of India during the war in Central Asia. Cyrus dominated the people of East and extended the dominion to the Erythraean Sea, the Indian Ocean. The Persepolis inscription mentions Punjab as the part of Persian Empire. The epigraph of Nakshe Rustam shows India as the 24th state of the empire. When Cyrus the Great was invaded by King Croesus of Lydia, an Indian king provided emissaries to Cyrus. Indian traders had great relationships with the Babylon, which as a center of business, and before the appearance of Achaemenids. Maybe this was why Indian meddled with the problems Western Asia and the war of Cyrus with the Assyria and Lydia. The Age of Great Darius. Darius was the third ruler of the Achaemenid dynasty who sent an expedition, and 3 of his inscriptions refer to relationships with India. Darius divided the kingdom into 20 states called Shaharban, the satraps, and they appointed governors over each. He selected a commander in each state for the whole present state. Also, the commander was an agent for the king. Along those two occupations also, he created third job, which was receiving the taxes. Taxes were mostly received in the form of costly metals, and half of like in gold, it was dealt in gold, and in others special metals. And most of the times, the 1/3 of the gold was given from India. The Indian province of Darius was the richest in his empire and the most populous. Herodotus tells us the wealth of the density of the Indian population and the tribute which was paid to Darius. Indian contingent in Persian armies consisted of the infantry, cavalry, and chariots. The period of Darius is glorious in the relationship between Iran and India. We also realize that the spiritual influence of Iran on India reaches its maximum height during this time. Iran and India after Darius's successors, particularly Xerxes, continued the relationship. In addition to his infantry, India also supplied lancers and chariots for King Xerxes. Moreover, horses and many dogs were also sent from India to Iran. The equipment of troops were the same equipment for infantry and carriages had been moved by horses. Indian soldiers fought in the battles between Iran and Greece. After King Xerxes and his successors, there is no record of the Indo-Iranian relationships. Iranians stayed in India till 320 BC as Alexander the Great attacked Iran.
Excuse me, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Mukherjee, please keep a tab on time because you have to be quick.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
I'll
just keep it a small only. So the economic relationships during the Achaemenid era. So trade, which was the major link, which was available since the Indus Valley civilization. So Darius is often renowned of all the being great financiers. He fixed the coinage system and introduced the golden daric. One of the earliest Indian words for coin is Karsha, which is of Persian origin. So during his inscription of Nakshe Rustam, the India and other states are mentioned from where this Darius was receiving taxes. So I'll just skip this and get to the cultural relations. So the cultural relations with India during the Achaemenid era, the Indus people had great links with Afghanistan and the parts of Iran, as if and the civilization of Mesopotamia. So in the western part of Iran, we found decorated pottery, which was excavated and which is similar to the Kuli culture found from the Indus. And Indus seals have also been excavated from Kish, Susa, and Ur. Achaemenian art and architecture had a great significant influences on India. Before the Ashokan period of history, there is not much evidence of epigraphy in India. It is also suggested that Ashoka borrowed the Achaemenian emperor's system of issuing decrees, especially from Darius. As you can see, the Ashokan pillars and the pillars from the Persepolis are very much similar in nature, and it depicts a Persian and Hellenistic influence. The culture and civilization of the Achaemenids influenced Indian subcontinent in field of literature, architecture, and Ashoka has used it extensively. In his royal palaces were influenced by the halls and pillars of the Persepolis. Like this is the present Persepolis, and the whatever the description we get of the palaces of the Mauryan Empire is similar to this. So Ashoka had also used the tradition of Darius writing inscriptions as we get the inscription, which is written in Kharoshti, Aramaic, the Kandahar inscription. The signs and traces of the Iranian culture and civilization in subcontinent are evident. The archaeological searches of Patliputra, the capital city of Mauryan Empire, had a saloon full of stone columns dating back to 300 BC, which is similar to that of Takht-e-Jamshid of Iran. Many similarities in religion is also present, as from the Boghaskoy inscription, which was found in Anatolia in 1957, which mentions the names of gods Indra, Varun, Mitra, and Nasaita, which shows a kind of which shows an interaction between these two cultures. The Achaemenid period have also certain Sanskrit names, like for Cyrus, the term is used for is in the inscriptions. It is said Kuru. Kuru, we all know in the Mahabharata we have the description of Kuru, and in Atarya Brahmana also. The Garg is Garta in Sanskrit, which means a sea. The audience hall of the Achaemenid Empire was called Apadan, and its Buddhist parallel is Avadan. So we can say that India and Iran had a very great relationship, and we are still continuing it. And so this was my presentation. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Mukherjee. And I'm really sorry that I had to intervene, but because it was due to the time constraint that we are having. So without further ado, I will jump into the next group of session. That is group 2. And before that, I would like to thank Panikke sir and Ms. Mukherjee for these wonderful presentations. So now I will invite Professor Akhlaq Ahmed Ansari from the Center of Persian and Central Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. So can we have Professor Ansari with us?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm here.
And before that, Pratishta ji, I would request you to please make Professor Ansari the host, so that we can, we can present.
Thanks, and I congratulate you for having this seminar on Indo-Iran relation. I would be talking on basically Persian as the shared heritage of Indo-Iran cultural relation. As we know, and we heard the previous papers and talks, and it was beautifully illustrated this aspect of relationship. In India and Iran, and the relationship of these two civilizations are probably the most intimate among any other civilization for last many thousand years. And we can take the examples from the literary point of view, that since the period of Panchtantra, which was translated as Kartak wa Damnak in Pahlavi, and later it had a great and deep impact on Arabic as well as Persian literature. It was later translated as Kalila or Dimna, and then with a variety of names, to the mention of Indian fables in the Masnavi of Maulana Rum, and subsequently his popularity along with other poets like Nizami, Sadi, Khayyam, and Hafiz in Indian subcontinent. And India or Indian subcontinent has been, in fact, it was not less a center of Persian language and literature than Iran, the heartland itself. And in many fields, India has contributed a lot. For example, in the field of lexicography, Farhang Navisi, most of the Farhangs were written here, particularly during the Taimurid Safavid period. In fact, the center of Persian literature was India. Similarly, almost all the aspects of Indian civilization are preserved in this language, and Indians have also equally contributed to this language. And this affinity and its popularity in the Indian subcontinent is also because the languages here were also from the same group, Indo-Aryan language, Persian also being a kind of sister language of Sanskrit. So that goes to many thousand years. And Al-Biruni's India is the source of information and insight for everyone. And Indian Persian poets like Amir Khusro and Bedil are equally popular in the whole Persian world. And similarly, we find many of the characteristics from the legends of Shahnama to the legends of Mahabharata. We find many similarities. For instance, Arash and Arjun. But somehow, for last 200 years, this shared heritage, and basically Persian is also our civilizational heritage that has suffered a kind of neglect, or a kind of that it we were separated from or divided from this heritage. And the region being identity politics is basic, the real cause and a trap which led to this civilizational decline in the Indian subcontinent. This can be understood through a glance on the historical development in the field of education, language, and identity politics during last 200 years. For instance, Persian for many centuries before the arrival of the colonial force in Asia was in fact the link language of Asia, and the most important language of literary and academic expression from the banks of Black Sea to China and to Indian subcontinent. Being an Indo-Aryan language, it has connected with almost all the languages of different regions, and even with Semitic and Turkic languages like Arabic, Uzbek, Turkish, Kurdish, etc. This helped vitally in the spread and communication of knowledge, poetry, philosophy, interfaith and intercultural dialogues. British, with their colonial ambitions and agenda, were active in all these regions, and from particularly mid 17th century to mid 18th century to 20th century, mid 20th century, and therefore they very well realized the importance of this connect, as well as the role of Persian language in this vibrant cultural, economic, academic, and political exchange and link. Persian during last around 2 millennium had well interacted and mingled with different languages of the subcontinent, including Sanskrit, and had incorporated their intellectual and literary traditions and also transported them around the world. This can be understood even by one aspect of this interaction, that is translation from Panchtantra to Upanishad. And we know Upanishad was translated as well as compiled by Dara Shikoh in 18th century, and it introduced this Indian text and tradition to West. This vivacious connect was indeed a great hurdle to the larger colonial and imperialist aspirations. which aimed and pursued both political as well as cultural ambitions. Therefore, in India, while pursuing their colonial agenda to control politically and prevail culturally, they first tried to dissociate people from this link, language through identity politics, and attach them to regional dialects. For example, they replaced Persian with Hindustani in 1835, almost an unborn language, a conglomeration of different dialects, not having even of its own grown-up prose. For this purpose, they had earlier established Fort William College, where some of the Persian and Sanskrit texts were translated into Hindustani, which was further divided as Urdu and Hindi on the ground of scripts, and then attached to two identities, that is Hindus and Muslims. This is obvious that who is talking in between?
There is a noise from someone's side. So I request you, sir, you are the host now. So can you please check? This is really inconvenient.
Okay, sorry. This is obvious that these infant languages would not have been able to stand English language and literature. Similarly, as English could not have the strength to compete with Persian in Asia, including the Indian subcontinent. So it was part of the politics of British Empire that firstly to replace Persian with the infant or frail local dialects in the name of identity, besides the language of the empire, that is English. Obviously, since these languages could not have the strength to stand before the English as a literary or academic language, English would easily become the link language. And exactly this happened during the course of last 200 years in the subcontinent or elsewhere, including Afghanistan and Central Asia. Later, the same policy was apparently followed by Russians in the occupied republics of Central Asian countries. And therefore, all those countries which suffered colonization also suffered a kind of culture fracture, means they were separated from their cultural past and knowledge tradition. The imperialist powers successfully pursued this policy by boosting regional nationalism and identity assertion, even by pampering through awards, etc. The British very cunningly used the natural fondness of the people with their local languages and dialects to divert their attention from losing their own greater and continuous cultural and literary heritage, and ultimately trapping into the English language and literary tradition. Since these regional and infant languages and literature could easily be defeated by English, as these were not having the required capacity to express the literary, academic, and intellectual content. Hence, people were obviously swayed to pay more attention to English. By then, the educational setup too was ready for the same, and so the new generation Indians easily became the bearers of English culture. This must be added that knowing a language whatsoever, foreign or native, is always an additional boon, but losing one's own linguistic and literary heritage is a gross civilizational catastrophe which we have inherited, though not realized yet, by almost losing the Indian Persian literary legacy. Though this is not the phenomenon supposedly has ended with the fall of the classic colonial era, but has been ceaselessly lingering on in different apparels. Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister of UK, candidly expressed in her article during post 9/11 scenario and illustrated this centuries-old colonial mindset, and I quote, "As long as we, the West, dominate technologically, our culture would prevail." But what Thatcher said is not a new or so-called post 9/11 mindset, but has its historical background for many centuries, and it has been repeated through the writings of Western thinkers and policymakers time and again. Either the civilizing mission of French invasion on Egypt and North African countries, or the concept of Oriental despotism of Montesquieu and its incessant reflection in the writings of Machiavelli, Marx, Weber, J.S. Mill, and later Western thinkers. Finally, as today we have inherited the general perception, or somehow have now been believing, is that Persian, Urdu, Arabic are Muslim or Islamic languages, and Sanskrit, Hindi as the Hindu Brahmin languages. As a result of this, people try to avoid the languages on the ground of identity affiliations. This view and approach is now more fueled by the vicious identity politics. This has impacted negatively almost all modern Indian languages and its literary, especially the poetry. And I should remind that before colonial, mullahs used to be the experts of Sanskrit. For example, Mullah Badayuni translated Ramayana and Mahabharata into Persian, and so did Dara Shako. He translated Upanishad, and there are hundreds of the examples. And similarly, Brahmins and other Hindus were expert of Arabic, Quranic studies, Persian and all. So it was considered as a part of the knowledge tradition, and it was never attached to the identities. The fundamental reason of the degradation of contemporary literature, especially poetry, is its divorce from the continuous literary tradition, which these languages substantially inherited from Persian language and literature. For instance, it can be witnessed that how this impacted the overall decline of Urdu and Hindi. Contemporary Hindi poetry is almost on the verge of demise. The stalwarts of the Hindi, who though themselves were all well conversant with the Indian Persian literary tradition vis-a-vis Arabic and Urdu, and thus could produce poetry of an inordinate standard, even in its stage of infancy, yet commonly got trapped in the identity politics of premeditated by colonials. As a result, Hindi poetry gradually went to decline, and at least it is evident in the contemporary scenario. It has lost its classic roots and rearing, and now totally vanished into the English blank verse tradition. Instead of following the track of Indo-Persian tradition, especially Sanskrit prosodic scheme and Persian genres and diction. Similarly, similar syndrome happened with Urdu poetry and language, and precisely on the ground of the identical regions.
Yes, I think someone's mic is got on mute. And also,
Mr. Abbas Mehdi, please mute yourself.
And also, sir, I would request you that we are running short on time, so I would request you to please conclude it.
I am just going to conclude within a minute.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact of the Indian subcontinent possesses 7 most spoken languages among the 20 most spoken languages of the world. The deplorable condition of literature, including publication and the readership, can reveal this the existent impairment. Hence, I have serious conviction that the replacement of Persian as the official language with the vernacular, that was Urdu and Hindi, was a calculated colonial imperialist designed to finally replace all Indian languages and its literary tradition with English. This was fundamentally aimed to detach and disengage the future generation from their continuous civilizational legacy. The vernacular too was deceitfully divided on the ground of the script and deliberately attached to identities. Among all, this was the severest damage done to the Indian civilization. Many other Asian countries faced similar situation and calamity and is still struggling and regrettably unable to comprehend the misfortune in perpetuation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. And I think you covered everything in a very concise and succinct manner, and I really appreciate that. And with that note, I would request our next speaker for the session, Professor Hamid Wafei. He is head of Asian Center Studies in Tehran University, and I would request Professor Clark to please make him the host so that he can present if he is planning to present any presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. First, I'd like to introduce today's presenter from my side, from ARC. The first presenter is Dr. Sayyid Abbas Mehdi Hassani, faculty member of Iran Al-Mustafa University and professor of Urdu at the Institute of Language and Culture Studies and director of Quran Scientific Group of Indian Scholar Association. Our second presenter is Dr. Farzaneh Azam Lutfi, famous Iranian Indologist and faculty member of the University of Tehran. She has done a lot of research on Iran-India relation, and her classes at the University of Tehran are one of the most popular classes on Indian studies. I hope everyone enjoy our presenter's speech. Okay, now I want to have a brief introduction of the Asia Research Center, ARC. Our center is established at the University of Tehran with the general objectives of developing research and technology in the field of natural science, human and social science, with the cooperation of Korea Foundation for Advanced Study on July 2017. The objectives of Asia Research Center are technology development in related field, help to develop international networks, cooperation with Science and Technology Park, successful business exchange between the parties, and strengthening scientific and cultural relation between University of Tehran and the other countries' universities. Iran and India have still mentioned their excellent cultural relation at highest possible level, and the cultural center of both countries are quite active. Such a strong cultural foundation can greatly contribute to the expansion of Iran-India economic ties and trade, especially since the two countries have broad potentials for cooperation in this field. As the director of the ARC, I welcome any cooperation with Indian centers in the field of Asian studies, especially in humanities. I would like to express my satisfaction with attending this webinar once again, and I hope this meeting will be the beginning of future cooperation with Indian Research Center, including the Asiatic Society for Social Science Research. At the end, I would like to make a point. In one of the maps that the professor showed to us, it was seen something as the Arabian Gulf. I want to remind, we don't have anything called the Arabian Gulf in the history. Please note that the name of this region has always been the Persian Gulf. Thank you very much. And I invite our speakers to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think you must invite the next speaker.
Yeah, is there any problem?
Maybe they are waiting for your inviting.
Okay, so Professor Mehdi Hassani, right? So I would request Professor Mehdi Hassani to please join in and share the knowledge with us. And we are just waiting for him. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, am I supposed to come now as a speaker?
Yes, please, sir. Please, sir. Please join in.
Thank you.
Thank you
Am I
very
audible
much.
clearly?
Yes, it's absolutely clear, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I must at the outset thank the Center for History and Archaeology, the Asiatic Society for Social Science Research for inviting me to participate in this very important conference. We have had some excellent presentations from different speakers, ranging from archaeology to literature, history, dating back to millennia. But what I'll do is I'll focus more on the present state of a relationship between India and Iran. As it has been mentioned, that India and Iran have been close neighbors. We have a multidimensional relationship. We have so much of interest in each other. At present, if you look at the present state of relationship, the energy ties, bilateral trade and business, connectivity issues, and so on, are some of the key elements of India's continuous engagement with Iran. I must say that India-Iran relationship has faced many challenges, but being geographically located in the proximate neighborhood, both the countries have always pursued to maintain strong ties with each other. So despite these political challenges they have faced, during the last 1 decade, one sees that India-Iran relations have undergone a lot of ups and downs. More than the bilateral issues, we find the fast-changing regional and global situation has affected the India-Iran relationship. There is a genuine desire on the part of both the countries, India and Iran, to engage and strengthen their bilateral ties. For India, Iran is an important country in the region for several reasons, such as trade, energy, connectivity, and geopolitics. The access that Iran provides to India in terms of reaching out to Afghanistan and Central Asia is not only unique, but also it's economically and strategically significant for us. Similarly, Iran offers a lot of opportunities for India, especially in the field of trade, energy, and fighting terrorism as well. So the mutuality of interest and concerns of both the countries, India and Iran, naturally brings both of them together. But the continuing controversies surrounding Iran, especially its nuclear program and associated regional geopolitics, has brought challenges to the bilateral relationship between the two countries. The The emergence of popular protests in the Arab world, starting from December 2010, had its impact on India-Iran relationship, which was struggling to consolidate it at that point of time. While the protest in the Arab world continued, Iran expressed its support for the protesters against long-standing Arab rulers. So Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE warned Iran not to interfere in Arab politics. Thus, Iran's approach towards developments in Arab political scenario ran contrary to the interest of the Arab rulers. Such persisting contrary positions between Iran and Arabs resulted in a further widening of the gulf between them. For India, that such deep political polarization in our extended neighborhood in the Gulf region was unfavorable to India's interests. So immediately after the tensions in the Arab states receded, India steadily gained its momentum in its engagements with Arab countries, but its relationship with Iran unfortunately didn't acquire immediate acceleration for obvious reasons. In 2015, the signing of the JCPOA emerged as a game-changer moment in the Middle East. India welcomed the signing of the deal, saying that this will ease the sanctions on Iran, remove the hurdles from conducting full-fledged trade and investment with Iran, and at the same time, gradually removing the Iranian regional political isolation. But such optimism and expectation of India, though ideal and pragmatic, was short-lived as President Donald Trump announced withdrawal from the deal in 2017. So from the Indian point of view, dealing with the controversies surrounding Iran has always been a difficult challenge. India during the last 2 decades have often faced a dilemma in dealing with issues involving Iran, both as regional as well as international levels. The complexity of the issues involved and the competing interest of the region as well as the global powers in the controversies involving Iran has made India adopt a very cautious approach. Iran's difficult relationship with United States, its competition and rivalry with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf monarchies, as well as Israel, with whom India has had huge long-term interest and stakes, has made India calibrate its relationship with key players in the region. India has supported the Iranian nuclear deal signed by the P5+1, and India has repeatedly called
sorry for the interruption, sir. May I request Dr. Vivekanandji to please mute yourself? It's creating a trouble for the speaker and for us.
Please make sure everyone that this is creating a lot of inconvenience for the speaker, and just more civilized.
International. Dr. Vivekanand, can you please mute yourself?
Is it possible for the host to mute?
Yes, sir. I think Dr. Pradhan, you are the host, so I request you to please try and mute everyone.
Anyways, let me continue with that.
Mr. Akhtar is the host, so maybe he can mute.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that India has supported the JCPOA, which is signed by the P5+1, and India has repeatedly called for full implementation of the deal. India has believed that it is crucial for the peace and stability in the region that the JCPOA should be adhered to by all the parties. So the withdrawal of the US from the JCPOA has added further challenges for India's relationship with Iran. As a result, there is frequent hurdles often been witnessed in the relationship, and the relationship has failed to gather speed. Coming to the bilateral trade between the two countries, Iran has been a key trading partner for India. Over the years, the bilateral trade between India and Iran has fluctuated because of the continuous sanctions on Iran. The reimposition of sanctions on Iran after US withdrew from the JCPOA has affected India's trade with Iran, as petroleum imports petroleum crude constituted a large chunk of the bilateral trade, the total trade has come down significantly. If you can give you some figures in the year 2018 and 19, the total bilateral trade between the two countries stood at $17 billion. But after the sanctions in the next year, in 2019 and 2020, it came down to $4.7 billion. So 17 billion to $4.7 billion is a huge fall in terms of bilateral trade. As you know, besides oil, India imports fertilizers, chemicals, iron and steel, etc. from Iran. And India exports items like mechanical appliances, vehicle parts, electrical machinery equipments, textile products, and so on. But the trade balance has always been in favor of Iran because in the bilateral trade, crude oil forms a major chunk in the bilateral trade and business. Besides trade and oil, cooperation between India and Iran in the field of gas has huge potential. Iran, as you know, is a gas-rich country, and India intends to import gas from Iran. Several options have been mooted over between both the countries, such as pipeline, overland gas pipeline, deep-water gas pipeline, LNG. While both the countries stay engaged in the energy sector, India's desire to import gas from Iran still remains unfulfilled. India was involved in exploration activities of the Farjad B gas field in Iran, after a contract which was signed between two countries in 2002. So ONGC Videsh Limited was involved in exploration service contract, exploration, and signed a contract with National Iranian Oil Company, and carried out exploration activities also, and discovered huge amount of oil and gas in the field as well. But unfortunately, we see that India has now been dropped from the project. This could have taken the energized the cooperation in Farjad B gas field could have taken energized between both countries beyond the bilateral relationship and forge a strategic partnership in the energy sector. Another key key element is the issue of connectivity, especially the Chabahar port. It is one of the few success stories between in the relationship between India and Iran. The Chabahar port is strategically important for India, as it is in close proximity to the ports of western coast of India. As you know, Pakistan doesn't allow India trade via land route to Afghanistan. So Chabahar port provides India that access, that much needed access to Afghanistan and deep into the Central Asian republics. Also, being situated far south from the Strait of Hormuz, the Chabahar port remains significantly insulated from the security challenges that may emerge from the tensions between Iran and other countries as well. The Chabahar Agreement intends to make the Chabahar port as a key regional hub for transport and transit. It intends to facilitate access to international markets and provide access to goods and passengers of other countries as well. For India, the Chabahar port would provide a long-term access through both sea and then the land routes to Afghanistan as well as Central Asia. Keeping in mind its importance, Prime Minister Modi described the Chabahar port as the golden gateway to Afghanistan and Central Asian region. Beyond the economic benefits that the Chabahar port provides, the strategic aspect of the port is even more important. This port allows India to circumvent Pakistan and reach out to Afghanistan and Central Asia, as I said. Both Pakistan, India, and India have strong strategic interest in Afghanistan, and Pakistan doesn't allow Indian trade with Afghanistan via its territory. The functioning of Chabahar port provides India the unhindered access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, thereby increasing India's strategic advantage in Afghanistan. Further, another strategic concern for India emerges from the fact that Gwadar port in Pakistan, which is very close to Iran border, and to the Chabahar port, is being developed by China. For India, two of its adversarial countries like Pakistan and China joining hands to develop the Gwadar port is certainly a strategic and geopolitical challenge in its neighborhood. So the complete development and functioning of Chabahar port would provide India the lever to deal with such challenges as well. I'll make a mention of the International North-South Transport Corridor, known as the INSTC, which is an important corridor for trade with Central Asia. Recently, India proposed that the Chabahar port would be connected to the INSTC, which would, as they say, to connect Mumbai to Moscow through Iran. India also proposes to connect Afghanistan through INSTC. This is a long 7,200 kilometer long multimodal route, which was proposed by Russia, Iran, and India back in 2000. Later, many countries, many Central Asian countries have also joined.
Sorry for the interruption.
So it envisages a network of ship, rail, and
iPhone,
road
can you please
for
mute
freight
yourself?
transport. That will cause carriage cost by about 30 to 60% transit time, from 40 days to about 20 days. So which will save both time and transport cost as well. Recently, in March 2021, we saw that the Suez Canal is blocked by a huge container ship that got stuck in the canal, and which took around 6 days to reopen. This incident blocked a large number of ships on both sides of the Suez Canal. So the incidents like this have the potential to affect the global supply chain. So there is always a risk when large amount of global trade is being carried out through a few choke points in the Indian Ocean or elsewhere. Thus, it is always good to have as many as alternate trading routes possible. Hence, in this context, Chabahar port would play a crucial role in reducing dependence in Suez Canal for transporting cargo due. So I'll conclude by saying that the future prospects of the India-Iran relationship are good. We must focus on innovative approaches and find new areas of cooperation, such as agriculture, pharmaceuticals, IT, hospitality, and I would definitely suggest more kind of academic engagement like the one we're doing, the track to kind of dialogue, focus on science and technology, etc. I mean, looking beyond the traditional areas of cooperation that both the countries are already engaged in. Discussion forums like this would certainly enhance our understanding of each other's policies, each other's approaches, history, foreign policy, bilateral issues, regional and global issues as well. So I would end optimistically by saying that there is a lot of scope and potential for further economic, political and strategic cooperation between India and Iran. But there are political and external impediments hindering for the cooperation. If both the countries would definitely try and sort it out. I will stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pradhan. So I didn't get the opportunity to introduce you. So this was Dr. Prashanta Kumar Pradhan, Associate Fellow at Institute for Manohar Parrikar Defense Studies and Analysis, MP ITSA. So yes, thank you so much, sir. And I think you covered almost every aspect of geopolitics, security, and strategical importance between India and Iran, and in the context of current development that have been coming up. So I think it was a very holistic session, and we get to know a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And so now I will request Professor Mehdi Hassani to take over the group 3 of our webinar. Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Pradhan. So can we have Professor Mehdi Hassani to take the charge for the next group of session?
Yeah,
thank you, sir. And before that, I would also request that whoever is the host, I think Professor Akhlaq is, so I would request you to please make Professor Hassani the host, so that we can streamline the process. Yeah, thank you. Yes, good evening, sir. Over to you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة على أهلها. मैं माजरत चाहूँगा बहरहाल, क्योंकि मुझसे اور اردو اور ہندی میں اسپیچ کے لیے کہا گیا ہے، تو میں اردو اور ہندی میں ہی اسپیچ کروں گا. اور ان سے میں سوری کہنا چاہوں گا کہ جو بہرحال اردو زبان بہرحال اپنی واقفیت نہیں رکھتے. میرا جو موضوع جو ہے وہ ہے ہندو حضرات نے جو قرآن کے بارے میں تحقیقات کی ہیں، اس کو ہم فارسی میں کہیں گے قرآن تجلیل ہندوان. تو میں یہ جاننا چاہوں گا کہ میرے پاس شاید 30 منٹ ہے، کتنے منٹ ٹائم بتا سکتے ہیں؟
20 منٹ سر.
اچھا 20 منٹ ٹھیک ہے. تو میں چاہوں گا مختصر سے وقت میں اپنی جو بات ہے اس کو میں کمپلیٹ کر سکوں. دیکھیں قرآن مجید جو ہے ایک کامل ترین کتاب ہے، جامع ترین کتاب ہے تمام انسانوں کی تربیت کے لیے. اور ہم یہ دیکھتے ہیں کہ خود قرآن نے کہا ہے کہ وہ جو دوسری کتابیں ہیں ان پر ایک طرح سے ناظر ہے، ان پر وہ تسلط رکھتی ہے، اور ان بہت سی جو آسمانی کتابیں پہلے کی ہیں ان کی وہ تصدیق کرتی ہے. یہ قرآن کتاب حق ہے، اور اس کی جو رسالت ہے، اس کا جو پیغام ہے وہ انٹرنیشنل اور جہانی ہے. جیسا کہ خود قرآن نے جو ہے وہ مختلف آیتوں میں اس کے بارے میں کہا ہے. قرآن
Sorry for the interruption. Dr. Subrat, can you please mute yourself? Subrat.
I would request
Thank you
everyone
so
to
much.
please mute yourself. It's very annoying that every speaker is speaking and then it's coming up with some or the other noise. Please.
Yeah, thank you. So please go ahead.
تو قرآن جو ہے جیسا کہ خود قرآن نے دعویٰ کیا ہے کہ وہ تمام انسانوں کی ہدایت کے لیے آیا ہے، اور قرآن میں انسانوں کی جو مٹیریل اور جو مادی و معنوی جو ضرورتیں ہیں، جسم اور روح کی ضرورتیں، اس کے مد نظر اس کو رکھ کے اللہ نے اپنی تعلیمات کو بیان کیا ہے. لہٰذا ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ جب نہ صرف مسلمان بلکہ دنیا کے بہت سے اسکالرس نے جب قرآن کو پڑھا اور قرآن سے جب وہ مانوس ہوئے، تو ہمیں دیکھتے ہیں کہ انہوں نے قرآن کے بارے میں جو ہے وہ اپنا قلم اٹھایا اور انہوں نے قرآن کے ترجمے کیے، قرآن پہ انہوں نے تحقیقیں لکھی، کتابیں لکھی. اور یہ سلسلہ شروع ہوا ہے سن 270 سے. زیادہ تاریخ میں نہیں جانا چاہوں گا کہ جب ہندوستان کے راجاؤں میں سے راجا محروب جو کشمیر میں حکومت کر رہے تھے، انہوں نے جو ہے خط لکھا جو ہے شہر منصورہ کے حاکم کو، جن کا نام عبداللہ بن عمر تھا. ان سے کہا کہ میرے لیے ایک ایسا آدمی بھیجیے کہ جو ہندی زبان جانتا ہو اور میرے لیے وہ قرآن کا ہندی یا سندھی میں ترجمہ کرے. تو ملتا ہے کہ بہرحال بادشاہ نے ایک ایسے شخص کو بھیجا ان کے پاس کہ وہ بہت سی زبانوں پر جو ہے تسلط رکھتا تھا اور بہت سی زبانوں میں مہارت رکھتا تھا، بہت سی زبانوں کا ایکسپرٹ تھا. تو وہاں سے انہوں نے خود محسوس کیا جو کہ ہندو حضرت، لیکن انہوں نے دیکھا کہ نہیں، یہ کتاب ایسی ہے کہ جو تمام انسانوں کے کام آ سکتی ہے، ان کے لیے مفید ہو سکتی ہے، ان کی اصلاح کے لیے اپنے سماج کے کام آ سکتی. تو انہوں نے اس طرح سے، تو وہاں سے سلسلہ شروع ہوتا ہے اور قرآن کا ترجمہ ہوتا ہے. پھر ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ بعد میں بھی مختلف لوگ آتے ہیں اور آنے اسکالرس آتے ہیں اور آنے کے بعد اس کا ترجمہ کرتے ہیں. میں چند ایک نمونے کی طرف اشارہ کرنا چاہوں گا، اس کے بعد جو محققین ہیں، اس کے جو ریسرچرس ہیں، ان کو بتانا چاہوں گا، خاص طور سے ہمارے اس آخری دور میں جنہوں نے قرآن کے سلسلے میں جو ہندوستان ہیں، انہوں نے جو قرآن کے بارے میں کام کیا، اس پہ میں ایک روشنی ڈالنا چاہوں گا. تو یہ سلسلہ مثلا سن 1881 میں آ کے پھر ہم دیکھتے ہیں قرآن کا ترجمہ جو ہے بنگالی زبان میں ہوتا ہے، جس کو گریش چندر اسین کرتے ہیں، وہ اس کا ترجمہ کرتے ہیں. اسی طرح سے پھر ایک خاتون آتی ہیں جن کا سیتا دیوی نام تھا، وہ سادہ اور سلیس ہندی زبان میں ترجمہ کرتی ہیں، جو 1914 میں جو ہے وہ چھپتا ہے، یہ بنارس شہر سے چھپتا ہے. اسی طرح سے اور بھی جو ہے پروفیسر ڈاکٹر چلوکوزی نارائن راد ہیں، یہ ترجمہ کرتے ہیں قرآن مجید کا اور اس کو جو ہے اردو میں اس کا ترجمہ کرتے ہیں. پھر اسی طرح ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ प्रेम शरण प्रांत जो है ये आते हैं, वो कुरान के 3 हिस्सों में तर्जुमा करते हैं, कुछ सूरे पहले हिस्से में, कुछ दूसरे हिस्से में, और फिर इस तरह से जो है वो ये तर्जुमा ऐसा होता है, कहते हैं कि ये इस तर्जुमे में उन्होंने के शुरू में जो है वो मतलब कहते हैं कि मैं जो हूँ महात्मा गांधी से बहुत ज़्यादा मुतासिर था, और मैंने स्वामी परमानंद सरस्वती की जो है वो हुक्म से मैंने ये तर्जुमा किया है। यानी गोया कि उस वक्त की जो बड़े बड़े वो होते थे, वो कहते थे भाई कुरान का तर्जुमा होना चाहिए। इसी तरह से बाद में जो है वो पंडित रामचंद्र देहलवी आते हैं, वो जो है वो इसका अरबी में जिनका जो क्या कहते हैं माहिर होते हैं, स्पेशलिस्ट होते हैं, उसका जो है वो हिंदी जबान में भी तर्जुमा करते हैं। तो हम देखते हैं मुख्तलिफ ये तर्जुमा होता है 1943 में। फिर इसी तरह से 1959 में जो है नंद कुमार अवस्थी आते हैं, वो इसका तर्जुमा करते हैं हिंदी में। रमेश राकेश वाराज जो है वो आते हैं, वो 1065 आयतों का जो है तर्जुमा करते हैं। कुरान इसका तर्जुमा जो है वो होता है तेलुगु। लाल इनका बहुत ही अच्छा तर्जुमा उन्होंने कंपेरेटिव वो किया है, जो एजुकेशन है कुरान और गीता की, सबको पढ़ना चाहिए किताब, बहुत मुख्तसर किताब है। उन्होंने तर्जुमे के साथ साथ कुछ जो दोनों में कॉमन बातें हैं वो भी उन्होंने उसका जिक्र किया है, जिनका नाम है पंडित सुंदर लाल, जिन्होंने उसका जो है वो हिंदी में तर्जुमा की, के बाद में वो इंग्लिश में भी वो किताब उनकी तर्जुमा। इसी तरह जो है हम देखते हैं कि बाद के ज़माने में भी जो है तर्जुमे होते रहे मुख्तलिफ ज़बानों में, चाहे वो लक्ष्मण आर्योपदेशक हों या फिर जो है वो विनुभा हों, इन्होंने आके तर्जुमा किया, या पंडित जो है रघुनाथ प्रसाद मिश्रा हों, इन्होंने जो है तर्जुमा किया, या जनाब महेंद्र आर्या हों, इन्होंने जो है। इससे लगता है कि हर ज़माने में और हर वक्त जो है वो जो स्कॉलर्स थे, जो हिंदू स्कॉलर्स थे, उन्होंने भी जो है वो तो कुरान को पढ़ा, आके उन्होंने जो है वो इसकी ज़रूरत को महसूस किया कि ये पब्लिक तक पहुंचना चाहिए, और जो हिंदू हजरात हैं, जो हिंदू धर्म के मानने वाले हैं, उनको भी ज़रूरत है कि वो कुरान के तर्जुमे से जो है वो आशनाई पैदा करें। जाहिर और अपनी कि मैंने सिर्फ बतौर नमूना कुछ हजरात का, स्कॉलर्स का जो ट्रांसलेटर हैं, उनका तर्जुमा किया। अब मैं आना चाहूँगा कि जो रिसर्च करने वाले हैं कुरान के बारे में, और उन्होंने जो रिसर्च की है और किताब के बारे में लिखी है, उनको मैं कुछ इन पे रोशनी डालना चाहूँगा। तो यहाँ पे जब हम उनकी मुस्तकिल जो इन्हीं तो तर्जुमे हो गए, उसके अलावा मुस्तकिल जो तहकीकात हम कह सकते हैं, जो तहकीकें की गई हैं, उस बारे में जब हम देखते हैं तो हम ये देखते हैं कि उसमें जो है वो हरीशचंद्र साहब हैं, वो आते हैं, वो कुरान के बाकायदा लिखते हैं, खुदा कुरानिक फिलोसफी नाम से किताब लिखते हैं, जो 98 पेजेस जिसमें पाई जाती हैं, जो सन 1979 में जो है वो दिल्ली से छपती है। इसी तरह से मंगल वो पूछ करके आते हैं, वो आते हैं, किताब जो है वो 88 सफ़े पर मुश्तमिल जो है किताब लिखते हैं, इसका नाम होता है एथिक्स ऑफ ग्लोरियस कुरान, इसका वो जो है वो किताब बाकायदा है। इसी तरह से जो है वो अभी मैंने जिक्र किया था तर्जुमे के हवाले से, लेकिन ये किताब है बाकायदा पंडित सुंदरलाल साहब की, जिन्होंने कंपैरेटिव स्टडी के तौर पर कुरान और उसका गीता का तर्जुमा किया है, और बहुत से दोनों चीज़ों में जो कॉमन चीज़ें थी वो लेते हैं। इसी तरह से लक्ष्मण आर्योपदेशक जी आते हैं, वो एक किताब लिखते हैं वेदा और कुरान के नाम से, जो हिंदी में है, और उस किताब में जो कुरान और किताब हिंदुओं की किताब मुक़द्दस वेदा है, जिसको वो स्रोत ही मानते हैं, उसको आके उसकी बररसी करते हैं, उसकी तहकीक करते हैं, और ये 1940 में ये किताब जो है वो उर्दू ज़बान में भी जो है तर्जुमा होती है और ये छपती है। इसी तरह से जो है वो एक किताब लिखी जाती है एसेंस ऑफ कुरान, यानी कुरान की हकीकत और कुरान की माहियत। 1962 में ये किताब जो छपती है, इसको विनोबा साहब ने लिखा, और ये जो है 255 सफ़हात पे मुश्तमिल है, اس میں جو ہے وہ اچھے طریقے سے اس چیز کو بیان کیا گیا ہے کہ اس کا جو ہندی میں بعد میں ترجمہ ہوتا ہے وہ قرآن سار کے نام سے ہوتا ہے. اور مؤلف محترم نے اس میں کوشش کی ہے کہ قرآن کے جو موضوعات ہیں، لیکن وقتاً تعجب کی بات ہے کہ جو مسلم نان مسلم ہوا کہ کس طرح سے جو ہے قرآن کی جو تعلیمات ہیں، ایجوکیشن ہیں، ان سے کس طرح سے آ کے وہ اس کو بیان کرتے ہیں. انہوں نے جو اس میں لکھا ہے قرآن سار میں، وہ نماز ہے، روزہ ہے، اللہ کے صفات ہیں، توحید ہے، آخرت ہے، قیامت ہے، اس کو انہوں نے جو اس کی بررسی کی ہے. اور ہندو حضرات کے موضوعات جو اس سے مشابہ تھے اس کا بھی انہوں نے اس سے ایک طرح سے کمپیریٹو جو ہے وہ اسٹڈی کہا جا سکتا ہے. جو اور جن لوگوں نے قرآن پہ کام کیا اس میں پنڈت رگھوناتھ پرساد مشرا ہیں کہ جنہوں نے اپنی کتاب جو لکھی اس کا نام لکھا قرآن آدرش، یعنی مثالی قرآن. اور انہوں نے جو موضوعات اس میں ذکر کیے ہیں وہ بھی بیرل جسے کہہ لیا جائے ہماری ضرورت کے ہیں، انسانوں کی ضرورت کے ہیں، جس میں انہوں نے جنت کا، دوزخ کا، موت کا، حیات کا، پیغمبر کا، نبیوں کا، نماز وغیرہ کو جو ہے وہ انہوں نے اس کی گفتگو کی ہے اور بڑے اچھے طریقے سے اس کو جو ہے وہ بیان کیا ہے. اسی طرح سے مہیندر آریہ صاحب آتے ہیں، وہ جو کتاب ویدا اور قرآن کی سمیکشا کے نام سے لکھتے ہیں. اس کا ایک طرح سے کہہ سکتے ہیں تنقیدی مطالعہ، اور یہ 154 صفحے پر یہ کتاب ہوتی ہے. اور انہوں نے کتاب میں جو ہے بڑے اچھے طریقے سے
مہندی صاحب معافی چاہوں گا، وقت کا تقاضا ہے تو آپ سے التجا ہے کہ آپ جلدی سے اسے انجام دیں تاکہ ہم اگلے سیشن کی طرف بڑھ سکیں. شکریہ.
جی بالکل. میں اس میں زیادہ تعارف میں نہیں جانا چاہوں گا. ایک اور کتاب مگن لال بوجھتا ہے جنہوں نے اخلاق قرآن، ایتھکس آف قرآن لکھی ہے، اور یہ بھی واقعی پڑھنے کے بعد کہ قرآن میں کیا مورلس بیان ہوئے، انسانوں کی مورلس کی ضرورت ہے. اب میں جو اصل جو بات تھی میں اس کو اشارے کے طور پہ، کیونکہ میرا وقت بہت کم ہے، جو اس زمانے کے جو سنت ہیں اور قرآن شناس ہم کہہ سکتے ہیں جن کا نام ہے لکشمی شنکراچاریہ جی، انہوں نے جو ہے وہ جو کتاب لکھی ہے قرآن کے ان 26 اور 24 آیتیں 24 آیتوں سے کیا ہے، 26 آیتیں بھی کہہ رہے ہیں جس پہ اعتراضات ہو رہے ہیں. البتہ انہوں نے پہلے ہی لکھا تھا وہ اسلام آتنک یا آدرش. اور یہ کتاب جو ہے ظاہر سی بات ہے کہ نیٹ پہ بھی موجود ہے، اسلام اور آتنک کے اسلام آتنک یا آدرش، یعنی اسلام جو ہے دہشت گردی ہے یا جو ہے ایک مثالی دین ہے. اس کے عنوان سے انہوں نے، اب ظاہر سی بات ہے کہ وقت ہوتا تو میں اسی اور تفصیل سے بیان کرتا. اس میں انہوں نے جو اہم ترین چیز بیان کی ہے وہ یہ کہ پہلے جب میں نے قرآن کو نگیٹو ویو سے دیکھا تھا، نہ پیغمبر کی سیرت کو پڑھا تھا، نہ ان کی حدیث کو دیکھا تھا، نہ ان کی سیرت سے ملا کے دیکھا تھا، تو میں نے جو ہے جو کتاب لکھی تھی انگلش میں ترجمہ ہو ہسٹری آف، اس کا نام تھا کہ اسلامک دہشت گردی کی تاریخ، جس کو ہم اردو میں کہیں گے، اس نام سے کتاب ہے ہسٹری آف اسلامک ٹیررزم. یہ انگلش میں بھی ترجمہ ہو رہا ہے. ان کا بیان ہے جب میں علماء سے ملا مسلمان، اور انہوں نے مجھے بتایا کہ جو یہ آیتیں ہیں جہاد وغیرہ کے بارے میں، ان کا پس منظر ہوتا ہے، ان کا شان نزول ہوتا ہے، ان کا بیک گراؤنڈ ہوتا ہے. اس بیک گراؤنڈ میں ان آیتوں کو دیکھنا چاہیے، پیغمبر اسلام کی سیرت سے ملا کے ان آیتوں کو دیکھنا چاہیے. پھر میرا ویو بالکل بدل گیا، اور میں نے دیکھا جو میں نے لکھی تھی اس میں باقاعدہ اس کتاب میں قرار کیا تھا. اس سے پہلے جو میں نے لکھا تھا اسے سن نہیں سمجھا جائے. پھر انہوں نے جو کتاب لکھی اسلام آتنک یا آدرش، اس میں انہوں نے جو ہے بتایا کہ یہ جو اسلام میں جو کہتا ہے کہ مشرکوں سے جہاد کرنے کے لیے، ان مشرکوں کے بارے میں کہتا ہے جو ظالم تھے، تو ظلم کرتے تھے، مسلمانوں پہ اتنا ظلم ہوا کہ انہیں آخر کار اللہ نے ان کو اجازت دی کہ اپنا ڈیفینس کرنے کی. اور وہ کہتے ہیں کہ یہ جہاد
مہندی صاحب مجھے لگتا ہے کہ اب ہمیں اس کو کنکلوڈ کرنا چاہیے، تو میں آپ سے ریکویسٹ کروں گا کہ پلیز آپ جلدی سے اس کو ریپ اپ کریں.
جی بس میں ایک یا 2 منٹ میں اپنی بات کو ختم کرنا چاہوں گا. اس کا جو انہوں نے اس کتاب میں نے تھوڑا سا ڈیٹیل، کیونکہ یہ وقت کی ضرورت بھی ہے. آج جو بہرحال ایک کنفیوژن ہے اسلام اور قرآن کے لحاظ سے لوگوں کے ذہنوں پیدا کیا جا رہا ہے، میں چاہوں گا اس کو تمام لوگ جو پڑھیں اس کتاب کو. اسلام یا جو آتنک یا آدرش نام کی کتاب ہے، نیٹ پہ بھی موجود ہے. تو اسے بہت سارے کنفیوژن جو قرآن اور اسلام کے بارے میں، خاص طور قرآن کو نا آیتوں کے بارے میں جس کے لیے کہا جاتا ہے یہ آتنکوادی کا پیغام دیتی ہیں، وہ یہ کہتے ہیں اسلام کے بارے میں کچھ بھی پرمانت کرنے کے لیے ہم یہاں 3 کسوٹیوں کو ہمیں لینا چاہیے. اس کو میں ذکر کر دوں پھر میں جو اپنی بات کو ختم کروں. کہتے ہیں قرآن مجید میں اللہ کا پیغام ہے، आदेश उन्होंने कहा, अल्लाह का पैगाम। दूसरी, पैगम्बर इस्लाम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की जीवनी, उनकी सीरत को पढ़ना चाहिए, और हजरत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की कथनी यानी हदीस को। इसके मिलान से हमें जो है वो कुरान को और इस्लाम को समझना चाहिए, फिर हम जो है वो सही तरह से समझ सकते हैं। वरना फिर जो है वो इसी तरह के जो कंफ्यूजन जो हमारे जहनों में मुख्तलिफ तरफ से भरे जाते हैं। और मैं यहाँ पे आखिरी तो बात कहना चाहूंगा, देखें, ये चाहे कुरान हो, चाहे गीता हो, या इंजील हो, तौरेत हो, जितनी भी जो है वो धार्मिक बुक्स हैं, धार्मिक किताबें, कोई भी जो है वो टेररिस्ट का या आतंकवाद का दर्श नहीं देती, सब अमन का पैगाम देती हैं, मोहब्बत का पैगाम देती हैं। और हमें जो है वो आज हम देखते हैं कि बहरहाल दुनिया में जो हालात हैं, जिस तरह से जो है वो किया जा रहा है इंसानियत के खिलाफ जो है, तो ये चाहिए कि दुनिया की इंसानों की इन किताबों में वो चीजें कि जो मोहब्बत, भाईचारगी, प्यार का पैगाम देती हैं, उनको हम लेके आए, उनको बयान करें। और उन चीजों को कि जो किताबों में आया है, मिसाल के ऊपर जंग वगैरह के हवाले, तो एक खास सिचुएशन के लिए खास उसका पस मंजर है, हमें जो है उसको उस जाविये और उस पस मंजर, उस बैकग्राउंड में देखना चाहिए। और दुआ यही है कि खुदा करे कि हम ये जो तालीमात हैं, चाहे वो तमाम मज़ाहिब में जो तालीमात बयान हुई हैं, जिसमें मोहब्बत और भाईचारगी के दर्द से हम उसे लें, और आपस में मोहब्बत और भाईचारगी की फ़ज़ा कायम हो, और दुनिया में तमाम इंसान खास तौर से जो ये एशिया है, इसमें सब प्यार मोहब्बत के साथ जो है वो जिंदगी गुजारते हैं।
जी, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया मेहदी साहब। और आपने जो बातें कही वो सही है कि जितनी भी मुकद्दस किताबें हैं, उन सब का लुब्बे लुबाब यही है कि अमन रहे, भाईचारा रहे। तो शुक्रिया, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। और इसी के साथ अब हम आगे बढ़ेंगे। एंड नेक्स्ट वी हैव मिस्टर जेसन वेलेंग, रिसर्च असिस्टेंट, सेंटर फॉर लैंड वारफेयर स्टडीज एंड PhD स्कॉलर, Russian and Central Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And his topic is evolution of Indo-Iran relations in the political perspective. So I would request Mr. Jason Whelan to join in and start the session. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, absolutely, sir.
Okay. Can I need to share the screen actually for this.
Yes, yes, I would request whoever is the host is, so please transfer the permission to Mr. Whelan so that he can start presenting. Yeah. Also, sir, I would request you to please turn on your camera so that we can see.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
Yes, yes, yes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for someone to share the screen. The thing, the hosting.
Okay. Yes, Ishani, can you write it down in the chat section so that we will have the permission?
Yeah, sure. Let me do that.
Yeah. Yes, Akhlaq sir, I think you are the host, so please help us in transferring the rights.
What I have to do?
Yes, you just have to click on Mr. Jason Valang's window. You will find 3 dots, and then you have to just click and make host. You can easily do that.
Is it upper side?
Yes, there will be 3 dots in blue.
I'm not seeing.
when you click on the window with Mr. Velan, you will find 3 dots.
On the screen, sir.
Yes, on the screen.
But the title of Mr. Jason is.
Okay.
So on the right hand side, you'd find 3 dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, just please click on that.
Okay.
So you'll get an option of making him the host.
And I have to allow
Screen sharing, right?
screen share.
Yeah, or else you make him the host.
Okay. I have made him host.
Yeah, so he'll
Yes,
be
sir, we can see
able to do that.
Thank you so much.
So
Yes.
Over to you, Mr. Jason.
Okay, just 1 second. Is my present visible?
Yes, it is.
yes, sir.
You can make it to full screen as well.
Yeah, just trying that.
And
Okay.
I also want to make this clear that I will raise my hand when 5 minutes will be remaining. So that
Okay, thank you.
you get a sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can I start?
Yes, sure, sir.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Walang, and I'll be discussing on the topic of evolution of Indo-Iran relations in the political perspective. Historically, India and Iran has shared a tumultuous and complex relationship, sharing a rich civilizational background and common ethnic and cultural traits, traced back to the ancient Aryan traditions and later in the form of religious traditions of Vedic and Zoroastrianism. Iran has had close relations with India, particularly during the Mughal period when it was called Persia, as everyone knows. During that period, it is a historically rich relation form of cultural, economic, political relations. Even in the present era, after decades of relations among the two nations, there have been a strong Iranian influence in the Indian region, which has existed in the form of art, architecture, and culture. Now we're into the Cold War era. Relations entered into the new phase of the Second World War in the year 1948, particularly with the signing of the agreements on air transportation. In the year 1950, the two nations signed a treaty of friendship, which was called for perpetual peace and friendship, which is still exists in the present era. During the Cold War, of course, the relationship between the two, as particularly with a lot of nations, was unstable due to the difference of opinion towards the support of the two major blocs. It was slightly closer towards the Soviet Union, whereas on the other hand, Iran was closer towards the United States of America. Iran's participation in the Baghdad Pact or the CENTO in the 1960s and the 1970s led them to emerge closer to the United States and Pakistan. During this period in 1956, the Shah of Iran did pay a visit to India immediately after the signing of the Baghdad Pact in order to maintain relations with the two nations and to assure India and its leadership that Iran's relation with Pakistan was not against India. Iran's support towards India during the Indo-China War of 1962 and the visit of Dr. Radhakrishnan, the president of India, time to Tehran in 1963 further improved between the two nations. Then comes the of detente, which is between the two superpowers of that period, the Soviets and the Americans, in the early 1960s, which paved the way to improve relations further between Tehran and Delhi. During the Cold War period, it was the United States who had become a defense supplier to the Iranians, whereas the Soviet Union had become a defense supplier for the Indians. Now we'll look into India's reaction to the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The Iranian Revolution in the year 1979 was established as a period of change between the two nations, as it led to the exit of the Iran, particularly from the sphere of influence of the Western powers. Iran's line movement, where India was one of the founding members as an important player, both of the nations close to each other. India welcomed the Iranian Revolution, and this was an important step towards the positive engagement between the two nations. During this period, the two nations sustained important economic ties, especially in the field of energy. It was during the Iraq-Iran war where India decided to maintain a balance of between the two all exporting nations, which particularly relations between the two nations. During this period, though, improvement in the nuclear relations among the two nations, Iran asked for India's assistance for the completion of the Bushehr nuclear reactor in the year 1980. Now we look into the Indo-Iran relations post-Cold War period. It was during the rise of the Taliban in the Afghan region when the two nations formed a strong alliance. It was during this period when terrorism became a common challenge, and this brought the two nations together in a common platform and convinced them to improve the relations. The visit of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao to Iran in the 1993 was an important point in the relationship among the two nations. India during the year 1993 signed a memorandum of understanding with Iran related to the IPI, which is the Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline. The visit of President Rafsanjani in the 1995 solidified this relation with India and led to mutual economic relations. It was during the year 1996 with the establishment of the Mohammad Khatami government that is considered as a period with a remarkable improvement in the Indo-Iran relations. During this regime, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee visited Iran in 2001. The visit was welcomed by Khatami as a new era of human international relations. This visit also brought about a very important signing of an important declaration, which was called the Tehran Declaration. Now, when we discuss about the Tehran Declarations, it shows that in both, which the main crux of this declaration was that both sides agreed to launch a phase of for constructive, mutual, beneficial cooperation. Yeah. Okay. Mutual beneficial cooperation covering various areas in the field of transit, transport, agriculture, and the service sector. The declaration also agreed to promote the scientific and technological cooperation, including joint research projects and exchange of related information on a regular basis.
So can you mute Ms. Gunanidhi?
I'm trying. I'm trying to mute it. So okay.
Someone, can you please help show with that? It's done. Thank you, sir. Yeah, please go ahead.
India, Iran, the Taliban regime in the region of Afghanistan, but the small difference between two nations was that while India was of the support the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Iran, on the other hand, was against the presence of NATO troops in the region. During the Khatami's presidential term, two major agreements were signed: the New Delhi Declaration and the Roadmap to Strategic Cooperation. Now, the New Delhi Declaration laid down the principles for cooperation in the field of defense, and the declaration also galvanized the military relations in various areas. The timing of the signing of this declaration coincided with the United States of America's military buildup in the Persian Gulf in order to invade to Iraq. Besides these agreements, several other agreements were signed in the field of economy, science, technology, education, anti-terrorism, and the reconstruction of Afghanistan. United States of America, under the presidency of George W. Bush, the president at that time, who was famously known for designating Iran as a part of the axis of evil, this statement further impacted the relation between India and Iran. India decided to sign the agreement for the framework of the civilian agreement, which was the newly developed relationship between the US.
Sorry to intervene. I think there is lot of disturbances that are coming up.
Yeah, another one.
Plus also your voice is breaking, so I think that it's not going in the right direction. So can we have your mics on mute, please, Mr. Omer Ali and Ali Reza Hashmi, and yeah. Yes, please, Omer. Please put your mic on mute, please. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, so as I was discussing on how India was supporting the framework for the civilian nuclear agreement, which based for the newly developed relations between the USA and India. It was also during this period the relation between the two nations became strained because India had started developing a close relation with the United States. After India had signed the Indo-US nuclear deal, India alone with the United States voted for the implementation of the non-proliferation safeguard agreements on Iran. India has used the good relationship with Iran as a factor for the better preferential treatment from the Bush administration for the Indo-US nuclear deal. Though Iran has been known for not support of the United States or Israel, even as you can see the current situation in the international arena, it has been extremely accommodative and understanding towards India's relation with the two concerned nations. Though this move was by the West, and India also clarified that its vote for ensuring the confrontation, the vote was particularly for ensuring that there was no confrontation to occur between Iran and the international community. This, however, did not have a perfect. It in fact had a negative on the Indo-Iran relations, as Iran reacted swiftly towards the vote. It threatened immediately to cancel the LNG deal from the year 2005. Iran would quote a higher price for the LNG in 5 minutes, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll be done with it. And make the process of negotiation over the issue rather difficult for India to accept. So keep this. Okay, so in the beginning of 2011, the relationship between Iran and India had turned to a full circle from the height of enthusiasm in 2003 to the bottom of aspiration in 2010. The period has been a period of almost no return relationship between the two nations. And now we look into the present era since 2014. India and Iran have tried to revive their relations on various occasions from 2012. The visit of current Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2016 in May marked an important step in the relationship between Iran and India as 12 MOUs agreements were signed to nations. On the step of revival of relations, there has been a meeting among delegations of various topics including the very famous Chabahar port deal. This is also a step in the right direction, and also recently, and hope for better relations in the future between the two nations. Recently, America threatened sanctions on India when India wanted to still buy oil from Iran, and with the coming of a new US President Joseph Biden, there's been the talks from Indian side that they were ready to restart the purchase of oil from Iran. In conclusion, I would like to say that India and Iran over the years have developed a complex relationship from the beginning in the year 1950s. The twists and turns of relationship between the two nations from the period of the Cold War to the present era can be seen as completing a complete cycle. As it stands in 2015, there has been a change in the view of relations between the two nations, and there's been a major change since 2011 where the relations have deteriorated. In the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, India and Iran rediscovered each other in the international arena on various levels. They have rediscovered themselves in the field of linguistic, cultural, and civilizational contact. The coming of the new government in India has tried to improve relations with Iran, and with the visit of Mr. Narendra Modi, has become based on economic and energy resource-based friendship. And with India, with the new West Asia policy, which India is trying to provide more focus towards the West Asian states, including with the involvement in various states, various nations like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and all. Iran is also another country which India would like to look into. Iran still has a strong role to play in Indian foreign policy initiatives, especially in the field of energy and economy, and even India can play an important role in the economy of Iran. Thus, a revival in the relationship is important for both parties to establish strong in the Asian region. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jason. And with that, I would like to, bring in Dr. Farzana Lutifi from Tehran University. And I request you, Mr. Jason, that you make me the host so that I'll be handling everything. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The presentation was very, very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I made you the host.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes. So do we have Dr. Farzana Lutifi with us?
Hello, am I
Yes,
audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are.
I'm audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You are.
Okay, in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful.
Yes. Yes, I would
Uh,
request you to please turn your camera. Yeah. Now it's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening to one and all. I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy during this strange pandemic. I would like to thank Dr. Hamid Bafai, head of the Asian Center Studies, thanks to him to having me, and also a great thanks, and I would like to great thanks to Iran Culture House, Embassy of Iran, New Delhi, Ambassador of Culture House, Dr. Rabbani, and also special thanks to all of the scholars in RCHA. Well, I would like to talk about my topic. My topic is comparative study of the common words of Sanskrit and Persian language. As you know, Iran and India have a many common heritage before Islam till now, including culture, language, architecture, literature, and art, and many more. The most important things here is the impact of the Persian language in India for northern and southern, I mean from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. What I mean to say that around 1,000 years ago, in many empires, especially northern and southern India, even king and queen used to speak Persian. Even like Hyderabad was known as Isfahan Hind, I mean Indian Isfahan. So Lucknow was known as Shiraz Hind, I mean Indian Shiraz. And Kashmir was known as Iran Sagir, I mean small Iran. During Safavid dynasty, which was from 1501 to 1736, the bond between Iran and India was very strong. At that time, Humayun was the empire, second empire of the Mughal Empire, came to Iran, stayed for about 6 months, I think. And during his return to India, he took back what he learned and observed. During his stay in Iran, that is the Iranian calligraphy, art, architect, culture, and recipes. Even the Indian scholars, philosophers like Kapila, Tulsidas, Kabir Das, Swami Bhupat Rai Biragi, Shankaracharya, Ramanj, started their writing with the Attar, Hafiz, Khayyam, Masnavi, Manavi poets. Even Guru Nanak, who was the greatest leader of the Sikh religious, used Persian poem and words in the first part of the holy book, Adi Granth Sahib. What we can find so interesting is that even the first ever Indian Hindu poet, Mirza Manohar Tosni, wrote his poem in Persian language. Now, without further ado, I will start talking about my topic. Well-known Indian linguist Professor Indosheki writes in Sanskrit Guide that despite the enormous changes that have taken place in the current Persian language, nearly 35% of its words can still be examined by Vedic and classical Sanskrit words. Since the linguistic science was introduced in empire about 1,000 years ago, therefore, according to the theories of the great linguistic, the blessing of the reading of Sanskrit and Avesta languages in Europe creates a science called linguistic, which helps to root and likes and and transformation to language that take place in different time and place. Since that time, the study Sanskrit has been necessary for any research in linguistic history, civilization, theology, religious, and human traditions. And so far, there have been so many extensive discussion and research about Indo-European languages that there has been to precedent for any other language groups. As modern Iranian languages include 2,000 years old traditions of Indo-European languages. Therefore, they are similar to Sanskrit. In this research paper, in addition to emphasizing on the study of the Sanskrit language and comparative linguistic studies, we study common point in Persian, Hindi, and Urdu languages with Sanskrit language. This study plays the important role of creating interesting to teaching and learning of a common vocabulary of Urdu, Hindi languages with Sanskrit language. As you know, Sanskrit language has a major importance for rooting in Persian words, since the root of Islamic Persian words are directly related to the Pahlavi language and to the Avesta and Sanskrit language. The need to this language to felt by linguists and language lovers to obtain possible present to Pahlavi literature. For more than 50 years, Indian Zoroastrian scholars have been reading a few smaller Pahlavi books, but no one has yet dared to write a collection of the words provided by that book. But the Avestian language, of which only the only one book, the Avesta, is remained, it doesn't have all the words of all language, and the solution of Avesta book can be made possible to some extent by the Sanskrit language. Since European scholars and Indian Zoroastrian were not expert in Sanskrit language, therefore the interpretation work was left halfway. On the other hand, Brahman Pandits, which were expert in the Sanskrit language, didn't know the Avestian language. The Avesta is an example of Iranian literature and a storehouse several thousand years of our ancient literature. It was due to the continuous reading of these two ancient languages, Avesta and Sanskrit, that a science called linguistic emerged, through which we find out of the roots and similarities and changes of languages in different time and places. The science was said to have originated in Europe a century ago. If Avestian languages had complete literature, we would never need Sanskrit language. With the originality of this language, the root of the dead and living Aryan language would preserve. Maybe if we weren't for Sanskrit, all the description of the sultans that illuminated this, the history, culture, and civilization of the land and Islamic Iran would remain unread. Therefore, the root of the words of Aryan, French, Iranian, and Hindi languages will be derived from this language. To get even more familiar with the history, culture, and literature of Iran and India, I would like to give you a few examples between similarity of Persian and Sanskrit language. It will only seems like languages containing few phrases and words to us, but these only form the history of the literature and culture. Common words in Persian and Sanskrit. Ahar in Persian means food, and in Sanskrit language is al-pahar. Bang in Persian, it means to call, and Sanskrit words vang means the same, and Hindi language also vang means good voice and pleasant voice, and also you can find in Hindi and Urdu. Tap in Persian, it means round, warmth, worship, and austerity. The same word is used in Sanskrit and also in Hindi languages. And Hindi languages is also used, the tapasya means worship. Bive, I mean, in Urdu, you can take this word, the biva. In Persian, bive, it means a lady who has lost her husband. In Sanskrit, the word vidwa is the use of this sense. This word is common also in Hindi and Urdu. Ba word in Arabic, bha, I mean the bha expression is the splattered words. Bha word in Arabic and Persian, this word is not pronounced by Arab and Iranians, but this word is quite common in Sanskrit and Hindi and also in Urdu. It is one of the main compound letters in Urdu also. Bhum. Bhum in Persian means land, position, place. The same word is used in Sanskrit and Hindi and also in Urdu. And you can find this word in Hindi, bhumi, meaning land and place. And when we see in Urdu and Hindi and Sanskrit and Persian, panch, in Sanskrit, panch, in Persian, panj, and in Hindi, panch, and in Urdu also is panch. And the panch itself is a native common literature. I mean, considered to Panch Tantra in Sanskrit, fabulous stories in English, and Mantagotere Atar, I mean the story of the bird, and Anwar Suheli in Persian. This was the real impacted common heritage on the part of the history, Persian and Sanskrit languages. At least, last but not least, I would like to inform you, sometimes during my classes that I take in Tehran University of Tehran, especially Indian Department of Indian Studies, I tell to my students that going to India is like return back to Iran and vice versa. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And it was really very insightful talk that you compare so many terms and terminologies between Persian, Sanskrit, and other languages. So I think with that note, I would like to introduce the moderator for next group of session. This is Assistant Professor Dr. Sadruddin Mosavi. And yes, thank you so much, Dr. Fazana. And it was really wonderful to have you here. Thank you. Namaste. Yes. So can we have Professor Sadruddin Mosavi with us from Tehran University? I don't think that he is with us. So shall we move to Mr. Ashu J? Ashu?
Yeah, I'm here.
So next speaker is Mr. Ashu J, President ASSR, Academic Counselor at IGNU Center, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi, and PhD scholar at Department of History, University of Delhi. So without a further ado, I would request Ashu J to.
Yeah, I want to be a host because
yes, I'll make you the host, and yes, please go ahead with your presentation. Yes, I'm making you the host. Just give me a moment. Yes, you are host now. Ashu, over to you.
Okay, just a second. No, is it not working? It's showing some error.
Yes, I would request you to please refresh it, because from my end you are the host.
Just a sec. No, it's not. Just give me one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? So could you please check? I'm logged in 2 devices. So could you please make me a host of the other one?
Yes. But if I have already made you host with one of your device, then only you can make yourself host.
Okay,
on another
fine, got it. So no, again, it's a big task to know which device is that.
That's fine. Take your time, sir.
Just, yeah, it's done. Okay, thank you so much and sorry for the delay. And I'll try to, is my PPT visible?
Yes, it is.
Just try to zoom it up. So technically I will be like, first of all, thanks to everyone, those who are here, and it's a good opportunity to speak and know about a country like Iran, and then you find a lot of similarities when you start reading, and then you find a lot of what you say, like a lot of similarities and the commonalities that whether it's in terms of culture, political sense, or whether it's in the sense of cultural, economical, or the religious perspective. But now here I will try to, since everyone have talked on the political literature and the different aspects like culture and all, so I would like to definitely put a highlight on the architectural traditions of India and Iran. So we'll be basically focusing on what kind of indigeneity we have and solidarity that India and Iran shares. So that is one of the most interesting aspects to look upon. So I just to give a brief information. So let's look back to India and Iran. So we all know that it is a two neighboring civilizations that have a long history that Pratap Chandran has been speaking about, and then from that, even the Pratishta ji was also being informing what kind of exchanges that was happening between India and Iran. So it is not only language, religion, art, culture, but there is some definite stuff there which has to be dealt, that is architecture. So India and Iran definitely shares a historical background, and it is and particularly when it comes to art and architecture. So, and it's very clear that everyone has discussed a lot of things related to trade and commerce, and also the bilateral and multilateral investments that are happening, and it's still happening around between the two nations. So, and in the sense, like historical and cultural linkages of India and Iran is one of the interesting aspects that amuse both the countries. So, if you have to talk about the history of India and Iran, then it dates back to the Delhi Sultanate, and then it's before that. But since I have been restricting myself to the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Emperor, so I'll not be focusing on the earlier part, which has been already done. So we all know that with the coming of the Safavids dynasty of Iran and then the Mughals, they found a lot of what you called affection towards each other. So then a trade becomes, and then the exchanges started, and the interactions between the people and particularly the emperor also began. So, and this exchanges between the emperor was one of the factors that led to the emergence of cultural, artistic, and political contacts between the two countries. So, and this led to the emergence of a different kinds of artistic styles, like for instance the Paitradura that we will be talking about in the later sessions. So, basic idea behind my lecture is to make you understand about what kind of architectural structures that were available in India that corresponds with that of Iran, or what kind of influence that Iran had during, particularly Iran had during the Mughal period. So apart from that, if you have to talk from the perspective of a religion, you see a lot of Sufi saints coming from Iran and Central Asia and settle in India. So these kinds of transitions was happening between India and Iran. So it's a long back history that we are and that we are still continuing with it. So now let's look into some of the aspects of the Delhi Sultanate. So we know it is with the rise of Islam that in the Middle East that leads to the what you called the understanding of what exactly is Iran, and then how the Iran became a center of Islamic civilization that thrived in perspective with relations to art, architecture, and culture. So that was one part when it comes to with the rise of Islam, and then later on, then which eventually from Iran then went to the nowadays in the Pakistan and India, and there are a lot of travelers. If we quote unquote like Al-Baruni was actually an Iranian who was traveling, and then gives accounts and lots of informations being there, and we have very clearly seen that there that how what kind of relation was there during that period of time. Now, coming back to then when we move to the Mughal period, so then we see a different shift. So you see a lot of marital alliances was happening between the Mughal rulers. So so that was one of the important aspects. If we see in terms of like how the Mughal emperor and the Iranian emperors was being involved in. So it was the advent of Mughal in 1526 that you see how specifically the influence of Iran in India becomes. So yeah, again and with the with the change of the throne to the Humayuns, so we see the priest Persian artists coming into existence, like for instance the Mir Sayyid. So these kinds of artisans were brought into India for just have some kind of new architectural designs. And then subsequently with the coming of the Akbar, then this patronage becomes to be very bold, and it expanded a lot. Like for instance, he was one of the he was one of the interesting person who wanted to set up a karkhana for the painters, and who can just have a floral designs and all. So it becomes one of the important aspects. Like, and for that, he was one of the person who was actually calling for the Iran artisans and to come, and then they can put forth their artistic styles and let the India discover this. So we see a new kind of color patterns have been emerging. So whether it's emerald green or lapis variants, or all these bright white colors, the marbles, and then the designs and all. So it can be seen as one of the aspects that led to the miniature paintings change into a different level. So, and then you see a lot of influences in the Indian architecture when it comes to when you see a blend of Persian and Turkish masterpiece. So that was one of the important aspects. So it's not only about the painting. So it is also about the creation of mosques, forts, palace, tombs. So these are all covered in the architectural region. So architecture is not something like you just erect a building and then it's done. So it's something that definitely gonna inform you about some historical significances. So in terms of architecture, the one of the most important inventions, or you can call it as the breakthrough, was the Pratishta designs that we will. I'll just try to show some of my slides so that you can see what kind, and many of you might know. So how the gateway has been created, and the large halls and different domes has been created. So these are not like just coming being invented in India. So it's like something which is coming from Iran. So we do have connections. So and this is very clearly seen in when you visit Humayun's tombs or Akbar's tomb in the Agra and the Fatehpur Sikri, or in fact one of the worlds of the wonder, that is Taj Mahal. So we see an Indo-Iranian style that is being flourished during the Mughal period. So it is not only like it has been very like the Imam was focusing. So it's like the similar way, whether it's Sanskrit or whether it's Sanskrit or Persian or whatever it is. So it's the same way we do have the Iranian citrus influence over the Kalpavriksha, which is one of the tree that even today is worshipped. So in some parts, so these kinds of, and the Ark Mehrab. So these kinds of influence we can see, Iranian influence we can see in the Indian context. So the PPT will largely focus, since I have a little time duration. So I will be largely focusing on 4 important aspects. So examples, I'll try to give some examples, but again, due to time restrictions, I will not be able to, but definitely I'll try to make highlight the architectural influences, what are the influences that actually affected India when it comes to Iran. And then what, in a simpler words, like what kind of influence does Iran have on Indian architecture? And then what are the effects of Iranian culture during the Mughal era? So that is one of the important aspects to know. And then the architectural solidarity. So what kind of common things we have, what kind of common things we share. So these kinds of information has to be put up. So first we will focus on the architectural influences. So if we have to talk about the architectural influences, the most beautiful thing that we should thank Iran is for having the gardens or the decorated forms and the minars. So we should credit Iran for this these stuffs. So I literally amused when I was reading all these information. So I was very much interested in the garden concept that was coming into existence. So when it comes to the garden, for Iranian, it was something that was actually connecting humans with the nature. So that was one of the aspects that Iran culture or Iran as a whole was focusing. So the garden, the invention of a garden or having a garden nearby any of the palace is one of the aspect that connects human with the environment. So that was the most important stuff that I was totally amused with. So when you read it in a full length, then you will come up with some 5 major conclusions or 5 major aspects that literally has to be focused on. Like first, it is the building of the garden is in the priority. So it's like, so even if we have a tomb or anything, but there is some nature involved in it. So it's not like you have a tomb and then it's done. So it's all about the nature, being whether it's a water or it's a tree or it's a garden. So the most important factor was the involvement of nature in a building. So that was one of the greatest stuff that India got from the Iran. So and we know a lot of kings and then the builders were trying to create a lot of magnificent buildings and having with a pure domination on the nature aspects. So whatever the Mughal architecture you see, you'll see nature being attached to it. So the second aspect was that when I was reading, so it's about the kind of the selection of plants, whether in terms of what kind of plants you've been taking, or it's like the way it has been oriented towards. So that was one of the most important aspects. Like where should this water comes from? So and what kind of tree has to be used, and what kind of things has to be used. It's not like you keep you have a random tree coming into existence and it creating a landscape art. No, so they had a decorative sense. So they have some what you call the tasteful sense that they try to have it in a good meaning. So and that definitely have helped the what you call the Mughal emperor to establish a good architectural buildings like that we have, like Taj Mahal, one of the instances. And then you will see a dark hard surface. So what is actually a hard surface? It is something like a construction of a garden of a tomb located in India played a very important role. So it's like you have it's been dependent on the geometrical arrangements. So it's not only about the selection of plant, and then you have a nature, but also a geometrical pattern to it. So that was also one of the high stuff that has to be looked into. So that we have to keep in mind. So and then you have the different other aspects, that is the words. So it's something like for instance, then you have to focus on what kind of you've been using a pattern, or whether it's all has to be connected all together. So the main aim was to, like, you have to look into the organization sections. So it's not only about like you have one-sided area, so you focus on the walls and you have to focus on. So these kinds of things has to be if anyone has to do it, they must have a sharp mind to do it. So it's like we should credit Iran for this as well. And then the most important aspects that amused me, to be very honest, when I was visiting, whether it's a Nishad garden or whether it's a Shalimar garden, so the water. So one of the important factor was the water. Since all these gardens, or whether it's a dome or anything, so any architectural building, the water was one of the important ingredient, we can say, because I just wanted to say is as an ingredient because these waters were coming from the natural sources. So imagine the way these stuffs being created. So it should be coming from the natural sources. So when I was talking to someone, so he was saying the need, or this water comes from a natural sources. There is no pumping or anything happening. It's only coming from the natural sources. That was one of the most important aspects to look at. So technically, what is actually the results when it comes to the garden? So we are very clear. Like it witnesses an enormous changes in the Indian culture, where the way the architectural buildings has been created, and then you see a kind of affections towards the culture and religion of and then you see a process of transformations. You call being involving into nature, more adoption of the nature to the nature, and then you see a kind of what you called a concept of elements that you have to create a whole garden with a sense that that actually connect to the indigenous people, and at the same time does reflect your own culture as well. So that has to be one of the important aspects to look upon. So this was I just have to give one example. So this is the Shalimar Garden, which is in and then you have also like, so that's this is just an example. So look at imagine the way the water being coming, and then the plants and the way these has been crafted out. So it's like it looks amusing. So now when it comes to the decorative forms, so we have, like I've already talked about the Petadura, and then you have the Daro panels. So this is one of the example just taken out from the museum. So it's like it's a Petadura design, and no, sorry, it's a Dodo panel. So so these kinds of things are very fascinating for me, like the way the craftsmanship that definitely been considered one of the important aspects. And again, we should thank Iran for these kinds of inventions that have been coming into India. And then you see a lot of calligraphy coming into existence, like the verses of Quran's been written on different monuments, like you have one in Qutub Minar. So I just wanted to try, but again, due to the limited time, so I can't do it. And then you have then the Jal. So that's one of the like you have seen in the Taj Mahal. So this is Petadura design. So you all know. So and I just don't want to explain that how the Petadura design was, and the most best example was Taj Mahal. So now the minars. So we know that the minars or stamba is actually one of the common feature that we see in the Indian subcontinent. But again, if you know why and what is the usefulness, and this has to be like we have to look into the Chand Minar, for instance, like which is built in 15th century, which is around 210 feet. So why it becomes very important? Because actually again, that the way I've talked about, like the verses of Quran has been written. So this is one of the main architectural feature of the Iranian monuments. So whenever you see an Iranian monuments, there will be the verses of Quran. So that has been actually been one of the representation that we see in India. So thus we can say that these kinds of the blend with the Indo-Iranian blends we can see in the monuments these days because of the people like the Mughals. So now coming back to what are tombs with
yes, Ashu, just to remind you that we are running out of time.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to wind up.
Wrap it up.
Yeah. So thanks. So we have to just come back to the garden. Just I want to give a glimpse. Like this is just a Charminar, which is in the Humayun's tomb, and this is in Iran. So you can see the way it's been created. So it's very common and the way. So and just moving to the influence and effect of Mughal Iranian culture during the Mughals. So we see a lot of meritorious relations and all. So we see also the coming up of new buildings like the Charbagh or the Eight Heavens, or you can see the different kinds of architectural buildings that are coming up to existence. For instance, the Shahjahanabad is one of the best examples if you have to take. Now looking into the architectural solidarity. So what we share, what we have in common. So like if you have to talk in, and I just want to give a brief example, like it was the Shah Jahan's wife and also his first minister of both Iranians. So you can imagine. Now I don't want to explain that what Iran and India have, why India and Iran have connections. So this makes very clear. So we have a period which can be called as a golden era when it becomes when the Safavids and Mughal dynasty came into existence, and because of that the architecture flourished. And then it was later on where the Mughal was mainly focusing on the bridge construction to the highways. At the same time, Safavids was focusing on the public facilities of the building, that particularly with the water wells and all. So when it comes to all together, then you see different kinds of building that is coming into existence. So that's what we call the golden era. So I just want to give some examples. So it's just a pictorial. I'm not looking into this. So these are some of the monuments which is in Iran, and then we have some of the monuments which is in India. So if you look at the Bagh in, so it's very, and then I should just keep on moving, and then you can understand that this is again in Iran. And then now I'll come back to the Akbar's tomb, and then this is the Shalimar Bagh and the Nishad Garden. So I've just taken the pictures when I was there. So imagine the way it's been created. It's like this image and this one. It looks almost pretty similar. So how can we say that the two nations are like very different when it comes to when there is a totally a historical boundage between us? So we can't say that India and Iran is a split two nations when it comes to the architectural features that we see. Okay, nowadays we have we don't nowadays the history have no essence like the way we see it. So we have to make sure that these kinds of relations do exist in our generation. So this is again the way these architectural stuffs has been created. It's very amusing, to be very honest. And then I would just give us some examples. Like I'll just focusing on I had so many examples like Humayun's Tomb, Qutub Minar, and the Agra Fort, but I'm taking mainly the Taj Mahal and the Chand Minar. So what is actually fascinating when it comes to India and Iran when you are talking about a monument? So it is about the location of the building. So it had a very good idea about what kind of location that has to be there, and the design of plans. So the way it has been designed, the way it's been a combination of two brains, that is India and Iran, that been working together to have a constant tussle to create some magnificent stuff. And then the dimensions of urban designs. So it's not only the ancient. So it's not about the what you called. It's just a local one. It's an urban design. So that's one of the interesting. And landscape, the way it has to be looked upon. So that has to be one of the aspects. And the elements of the designs in the building complexes. So what kind of elements has to be there in the building? That has to be one of the aspects. And the solidarity and the vigorness of the building. So that has been one of the important aspects. And the designs and inside and outside the facades of the buildings. So it's not only about the insides, or it's not about the monument itself, but it's insides and the outside. So they had a very critical sense of humor, that they focused on inside and outside areas. And then the techniques of the structures, whether it's a natural bodies like water bodies, that where you get a water. So that has to be like have the person who is doing this has to have a great brain to be doing all these kinds of things. And the lightning design. So the way it's been designed, like for instance, the Taj Mahal itself, you take, so the way it has been designed. So that is one of the important. And utilization of color, like the way, what kind of marble has to be used, what kind of color, like the emerald color, which has been from the Iran. And so these kinds of information has been very much kept. And then the construction materials. So these kinds of information gives us and then I would just want to conclude. So we from these works, we can clearly say that this is not only about what you call the Mughal or the Delhi Sultanate, or just it is something like it is more than I know it's an amazing monuments. But if you have to talk from the contemporary perspective, keeping this in mind, so I don't think so we do have any cultural differences. So it's like we do have a cultural commonalities, and this is and just imagine if it is reflected from a piece of monument, then that makes it beautiful. And then these works are actually representing a highly skilled artistic activity and a deep expression and sense. That is one of the important aspects as to look at, and a rich Islamic culture that you see by the beginning of the 17th centuries. And at the end, if we, as we say, we take it as a Mughal architecture, no, but it is something like we call it as a school of Islamic architecture. So we have to thank Iran for the cultural transmissions that they gave to the Indian architectural styles, and then we should definitely come up. Then only we have definitely come up with such a artistic monuments that we see today. So, thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Ashu, for the wonderful presentation with beautiful images to draw a parallel between Iran and India, and I hope that everyone enjoyed that. So our next speaker for Group 4 is Assistant Professor Dr. Mandana Teshayar. I'm really sorry for the pronunciation. So can we have Dr. Mandana from Alame Tabatabai University? Yes.
Thank you very much, Moha.
Yes,
Ashu, your presentation was fascinating. I enjoyed a lot, and you encouraged me to go and visit some Iranian gardens again from a new aspect. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's both an honor and a pleasure for me to participate in this high-esteemed conference. And I would like to appreciate Center for History and Archaeology in the Asiatic Society for Social Science Research and Iran Culture House for their initiative to gather us here to discuss about Indo-Iran historical relations from different aspects. As we all know, the relations between Iranians and Indians enjoy an age-old history, although historical events created a gradual distance between the peoples of these countries and reduced their contacts and closeness. The discovery of oil in the oil-rich areas of southern Iran paved the way for the restoration of the relations between Indian and Iranian peoples. Let me tell you a very interesting story. In 1908, the first oil well in the Middle East was discovered in the town of Masjid Suleiman, located in southwestern Iran. The oil explorers were British engineers who were privileged to discover and extract Iranian oil. On the first day after the discovery, they sent their experts in various fields to the area to set up one of the largest global oil industries on the shores of the Persian Gulf. Many of these forces came from Iran's neighboring country, India, and some were chosen from among Indian Muslims. These people came to the southern areas of Iran and remained there in three job categories of industry workers and specialists, military forces, and other jobs, including medicine. Actually, I worked on this project for 2 years. I visited different cities in Khuzestan province in Iran. I traveled to India and visited Calcutta, which was the center to send the Indians to Iran, to Khuzestan province for in the section of oil industry. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any book or article about the Indians who lived in Iran for about 80 years. I just only could find some data, some informations in the book memories, diaries, and like this. And I tried to gather all of these things, and I could find some young Indian people who are still living in this region, and their ancestors immigrated from Calcutta to Khuzestan province. Although following the nationalization of Iran's oil industry in 1951, the British left the oil-rich areas of southern Iran, the presence of Indians in these areas lasted for about 8 decades and left numerous social, cultural impacts which can still be observed among the peoples of these cities. The information provided in this study is mainly obtained from various sources dealing with the history of oil in southern Iran. The main purpose of this research is to investigate the relations between the Indians living in the oil-rich areas of southern Iran with the indigenous peoples of these areas between the years 1908 and 1988. In the present study, I have considered the role played by Indians in the emergence of language and dialect changes among the people of the oil-rich areas of southern Iran, the prevalence of English and Indian words among the peoples of these regions, the spread of modernity in these areas, in convergence and the convergence of Indian and Iranian Muslims, and the increase in the awareness of Iranians and encouraging them to stand up the British presence and prevent the British violations of the rights of Iranian people. I want to say that in the constitutional revolution in Iran and in oil nationalization in Iran, Indian intellectuals played a very important role to encourage Iranian intellectuals and activists to stand against colonialism and also dictatorship. In the contemporary era, in terms of economic relations, there were trade activities between Khuzestan and regions outside Iran before the emergence of the oil industry. During this period, I mean end of 19th century, many Indian merchants came to southern Iran and opened trading houses. The trades included the export of various agricultural products from Khorramshahr, Shadegan, and Mahshahr, and import of paper, spices, and other goods. From the 20th century, presence of the British Oil Company in Khuzestan can be conceived of as the continuation of the British presence in India. Many of the company's employees were people who had traveled to the oil-rich areas of southern Iran, not from Britain, but from India. Even since its inception, the company had put the employment of Indian workers and employed on its agenda so much so that a special office had been set up in Calcutta for the same purpose. Gradually, with the increase in the number of Indians living in the oil-rich areas of southern Iran, their lifestyles became somewhat popular among the peoples of these regions. The popularity of foods such as samosa, pakure, jalebi, and the high use of peppers and other spices in local cuisine is reminiscent of the cultural interaction which took place between Indian employees and locals. Even today, if you want to eat a very delicious samosa in Iran, you should go to Khuzestan province. The Indians who were brought to southern Iran were initially mostly Sikhs. They were housed in a special neighborhood in Abadan called Sikh Lane, next to the refinery. Indians in southern Iran had their own cultural and ethnic ceremonies and could freely practice their religious ceremonies and other festivals. The cultural similarities between Indians and Iranians were the reason they had little difficulties interacting with Iranians. Since some Iranians were more in touch with Indians than with the British, Indians gradually mediated a two-way cultural transfer between Iranians.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaniji, first for introducing me and also.
After a while, sorry
for the interruption. Vishnuji, can I request you to mute yourself?
Yes, please mute yourself, Vishnu.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. After a while, in addition to the Sikhs, the British brought some Muslim Indians to the oil-rich areas of southern Iran, in that they thought these Indians could better get along with Iranians. Although the number of Muslim Indians was less than the Sikhs or Hindus, they had Hosseiniye in their areas. Unlike the Sikhs and Hindus, some Indian Muslims worked in the markets of the oil-rich cities like Abadan, Ahvaz, and the other cities. Their cafes, coffee shops, and spice shops were famous in these cities and had numerous customers. In the city of Abadan, the Caucasian neighborhood, in which Indians had set up coffee shops, and hence its name derived from the foreign word coffee shop, was an afternoon gathering place for workers. The first public cinema in Abadan was built in the late 1930s under the name of Shirin Cinema, located on Shahpur Street. The owner of the cinema, Haj Muhammad Qaus Ahmadiyeh, was a Muslim from India. As the only non-governmental cinema in Abadan at that time, it was a two-story building with a summer theater hall. And after World War II, 2 more floors were added to the building, and it became the largest cinema in Khuzestan and even in the whole of Iran. The Indian Muslims who came to southern Iran were mostly Sunnis, but this didn't cause any clash between the Sunnis and the Shiite Muslims of these cities. Muslim Indians frequented Iranians and even married them easily. This had caused many Muslim Indians to remain and become citizens of Iran after the departure of the British. The first British group to come to the city of Abadan in southern Iran to establish a refinery were the employees of the Rangoon or Yangon refinery of Burma. The Rangoon inhabitants who were brought to Abadan were all Sunni Muslims. For the same reason, after coming to Abadan, they tried to build a mosque. The Rangooniha Mosque is one of the oldest mosques of modern Abadan, which enjoys a beautiful architecture. Unfortunately, due to its location on the banks of the Arvand River, the mosque suffered a lot of damage during the Iraq-Iran war, but it has been restored in recent years and is a place of pilgrimage for many Muslims from the region. Simultaneously, with the discovery of oil in Khuzestan and the establishment of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, English words started to be borrowed extensively in these areas, especially in Abadan. Indians who were numerous in Abadan and dealt with local peoples of the city every day had also their linguistic impacts. The widespread use of Indian staff in social gathering, clubs, and houses led to increasing use of Indian words among the people of the area, so that until the 1930s, Hindustani was one of the 3 languages used in the oil fields: Persian, English, and Hindi. It is worth adding that in those days, the common currency used in Khuzestan was the Indian rupee, and the company paid the employees in the same currency. During this period, the British who lived in the oil-rich areas of southern Iran had built a cultural wall around themselves and blocked all sorts of contact with Iranians. In other words, they created a severe cultural separation between themselves and other residents of the cities and tended to intensify the cultural separation with physical separations. In many cases, this inequality was not limited to Indians and included to Iranians and included the Indians living in these areas as well. For example, the company had even separated its British and European employee bosses from those of Iranian and Indian workers. The unequal attitudes of the British towards these people helped Iranian and Indians to find a brotherly attitude towards each other. In 1922, a large number of Iranian workers who were supported by most Indian workers went on a strike to increase their wages by 100%. British troops then intervened and arrested a large number of strike leaders. 2,000 Indians were also deported. Following the nationalization of the oil industry in Iran and the disposition of the British of Iran's oil resource in 1951, several Indian employees of the oil company decided to continue their cooperation with the new Iranian managers of the company. It continued in subsequent years, so that in the 1960s and 1970s, several of the physicians at the oil company hospitals in the oil-rich areas were Indians. However, the improving economic conditions in India and the increasing demands for manpower in the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf paved the way for the migration of many Indians from Iran. And today, after 4 decades, Indian people can rarely be found in the oil-rich areas of Khuzestan province. In conclusion, I have to say that the way Indian tolerance combined with Iranian hospitality led the two nations to find once again, and after centuries of neighborhoods, the opportunity to show the possibility for the coexistence of cultures and civilizations in the strategic and important oil-rich areas in Iran. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandana, to underlining the intermingling of, Indian diaspora with Iranian people. And yes, we do share a special bond, both culturally and historically, with Iran. And we really look forward to, getting things better in coming years. And yeah, thank you very much for your wonderful session. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So much.
Namaste. So yes, so we have two people from the one from the inaugural group 1 and and one more from group 4. That is, from group 1 we have Dr. Ghulam Ali Haddad Adil, who did not was with us. So I would request, if he is around, he can present or talk maybe. And also from group 4 we have Dr. Sadruddin Mosavi. So I request both of them, if possible, they can join in and share their views. And if in case we don't have them with us, so I would request Mr. Shani Sinha, our lead international division, to take over and go ahead with the conclusion. But before that, I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Iranian Embassy and Iran Culture House to give us this opportunity to organize this webinar. And I'm really happy that we have so many wonderful sessions today, and it really helped us to build a bridge between the two nations. And we are really looking forward to get things better in coming years. So I really thank you so much, Dr. Rabbani, for giving us this opportunity and helping us, and all the team with Iran Culture House, Mr. Zafar, who has been very kind to assist us with all the technical support. And now over to you, Ishani, and thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mohanji. So to have the closing remarks today, like, it's an honor that India and Iran could able to find a platform today where we covered a wide range of arenas, from taking back to the ancient times, covering medieval times, talking about modern times, and then we covered political, socio-economic aspects, including religious aspects as well. So definitely there is a very high influence of India and Iran, and we share a very close relation between the two nations. So I think with this session that again, all those who are new to this field could realize that India and Iran, they share a bond which is not new. It has been there since ages, and it's a legacy that has been carried forward. And we look forward to have more and more new collaborations more. So yeah, like we see that in ancient India, like the term globalization was adopted in 1991, but we see how the cultural influence was already there since ancient times. So, and we covered the nuclear deals, empires, languages. We could cover various aspects of oil, plant, and plantations. So in short, I would like to thank all the speakers who could manage even in the tough time of COVID pandemic, that they were able to give us time and highlight why the relation of India and Iran is important. We definitely had bilateral relations before, and definitely the Iran Culture House deserves a lot of thanks from us for collaborating with us and giving us the platform and the speakers to present them. We have had an amazing evening today and covered a lot of aspects today. So on behalf of Azhar, Center for History and Archaeology, I, being the team lead of Department of International Division, would like to extend my gratitude to all the speakers and the Iran Culture House today. And we look forward to have more and more collaborations after this, all the 4 sessions that we have today. So thank you so much to all the participants that have been here and have been amazing audience, though there were a few technical glitches, but I think that's how we are still adapting with the technology. Apart from that, the content we had today about the talks and all the speakers, it was commendable. So a big shout out to everyone, all the speakers, and thank you for sparing the time to us. So I would like to end with my gratitude to everyone, also to the wonderful audience today. And may I request Dr. Pramod to take over and give his closing remarks for the session today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible? Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir. We can hear you clearly.
Thank you, ma'am. At the outset, I would like to convey my special regard to Dr. Rabbani, the Cultural Counselor, Iranian Embassy, and the whole team from Iran, giving us an opportunity to discuss the wide range of subjects across our relations back to the Neolithic period till today, in 21st contemporary time. We in ASA are extremely privileged to have the opportunity to discuss such a wonderful topic, the relation between India and Iran from national and historical perspective. As you know, all you know, India and Iran are two old civilizations having age-old relationship in exchange of thought among many other areas which dated back, as I told, the Neolithic period. It's not a new. So there is a strong cultural, linguistic, religious, architectural, symmetrical bond between the two nations. As we have rightly, many of our scholars very proficiently and very clearly, categorically mentioned, India and Iran relation in its historical context and dimension has a mutual bond and a mutual relation of being mutual interest. Although it ran into troubled water during the 1990s, basically with the international hostile environment and atmosphere following the 1979 as many two, three speakers have rightly mentioned. India and Iran relation had a major setback during the period during Iran and US hostility, and India took a harmonious balance, tilting to neither side, maintain a very good relation with Iran for its own strategic and also cultural specificity. And particularly, two major declarations in the annals of history of relation between India and Iran, the Tehran Declaration of 2001 and New Delhi Declaration of 2003 promoted peace and tranquility, friendship, people-to-people contact to solve the mutual differences persisting between the two countries. It is really amazing and very excellent deliberation by most of our speakers from Iranian side, from our Indian side. A range of subjects, covering range of subjects from architecture, culture, religion, and economic, political, strategic, diplomatic relations. Of course, to recall back, India, although started the diplomatic relation with Iran after getting liberated from the colonial rule in way back to 1950, but still had a forward look. Beyond that, it is a very cordial, amicable, close tie between the two countries as they were sharing a common border and being geographically or their closer proximity. Even though among the two countries, the relation was strained or went through a turbulence due to a variety of conflicting currents to address the conflicting currents of international politics with the twists and turns in the history annals of history. However, the contemporary scenario, the two countries having its cultural proximity, cultural cultural proximity and strategic, partnership, and also they have came together to give a effective leadership in Asia and Central Asian region too. So I congratulate and all of our speakers, distinguished speakers, who very meticulously and brilliantly analyze the conflicting currents of the Indo-Iranian relation from different aspects, touching upon from architecture to political, diplomatic relation, and few of the presentations were excellently well. And almost all these speakers spoke so nice, so objective. I think it is, if we can, I'll be glad if our president, Mr. Ashu, can take up the project to publishing in a journal, the book form. It will be, so almost all the presentations are so nice, so brilliant, so excellent, unimaginable. So I am extremely grateful to Iranian Culture House for giving us a chance to discuss such a wide range of subjects among India and Iran, which is so pivot to our relation. And still India and Iran holds a key role in the region of Asia to take an effective leadership in order to consolidate and promote goodwill, peace and tranquility in the region. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Over to ma'am. Thank you. Over to Isani ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Do we have Miss Vishnu today? Mohanji, can you please check on that?
Yes, Ishani.
Okay.
Yeah, Vishnu is here.
All right, so she may take over now.
Okay, am I audible? Yeah? Am I audible to you?
Yes. You are visible and audible.
I don't know what is
Go
wrong
ahead.
today. My network is very fluctuating.
It's fine now. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much for introducing me. Let me start by also thanking all the participants and speakers who have made this program a success. Also to Shaniji and Mohanji, who have moderated this long webinar, because I understand it was tough. So, let me make it a little short. Let me make it quick. Every country.
Sorry for the interruption. May I request Dr. Pramod to keep himself on mute?
Yeah, is it fine?
Dr. Pramod, can you please mute yourself? Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead.
Every country, every community are strongly tied together by an intricate complexity of individual values, norms, and a specific history. So to understand their culture and history is to understand them. The Iranian Culture House and the ARC, like Azhar, believes in understanding such cultural gap and bridging it by preserving and promoting mutual understanding of different cultures and enhancing the cultural activities of creativity. As a team has recently launched an internship program on preserving India's cultural heritage, the result of which is going to be publishing of 20 plus handbooks on different cultural sites of India. We have recently concluded language course in Brahmi. We have recently concluded, just today in fact, concluded a certificate course on digitalization and documentation of archives, and we are very soon coming up with yet another program on numismatics. So looking at the mutual shared objectives of both Azhar, ARC, and the Iranian Cultural House, we hope that this program is just the beginning of many such programs which will help or which will provide opportunities not just to the students, to the faculties, to the researchers, but will also help in positioning our places to be more attractive in the future. We hope to be working with the Iranian Cultural House more closely in the upcoming months, so that we can share our shared objective, so that our shared objectives can reach wider audience and participants across border. With that, as a Joint Secretary of Asiatic Society of Research, I would like to close my remarks on the webinar, and I would also like Mr. Ali Rabbani to please kindly take away the screen. Thank you so much. Namaste. Jai. Mr. Ali Rabbani, please take over.
Thank you very much. Good evening. This book is over, but the stories continue. We have heard a lot of valuable and wise discussion of Iranian and Indian professors. Certainly the scope, depth, and historical roles of the two great nations of Iran and India are so great that it's not possible to do the right thing in the small session like this. But certainly holding such academic meeting, it can encourage researchers, especially the young generation, interested in historical study and Indo-Iranian relations, to get a more appropriate and clear view of the relation between Iran and India. I'm sure that the scientific and academic centers of Iran and India can learn from this valuable experience from the history of Iran and India relations, which is a very important and valuable capacity and opportunity for academic and scientific cooperation, because the unique heritage of the past and the common history of the Iran and India is not only related to the past, but is a assess for coexistence and joint cooperation, especially in the field of scientific, academic, and cultural cooperation. I would like to thank all these Indian and Iranian professors for providing valuable topic as well as constructive suggestion in this webinar. I would like also to thank all the esteemed officials of the Indian History and Archaeology Association who took the initiative in organizing this scientific webinar. I would also like to thank the Iranian institution participation in this program, especially the Center for Asian Studies of the Tehran University. I hope that our program today will be a positive and constructive step toward the formation and development of scientific cooperation between the research and scientific centers of the two countries, especially in the field of history and archaeology. I hope to see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. So, Ishani ji, so since we are left with 20 good minutes, so if possible, can we have some questions if there are?
Yes, we can take that. If anyone wants to ask, they can.
Okay. So any of the participant can ask any question or discuss something, or want to discuss something with any of the speaker, they can definitely go ahead.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there are questions, but if Dr. Mandana is here, I would like to, discuss something with her if she's there. I don't think she is here. Can someone confirm? Is she here?
I can't see her.
No, Mark is not here, I guess.
So yeah, we don't have any questions, Ishani ji. So I would request our, international lead to just take it forward and we can, wrap it up. Maybe.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mohanji. So yes, I approve to close the session today. Thank you everyone for your time and patience. It was in fact a great evening, and all of us must have learned a lot from going back to our ancient times, covering the medieval times, and then talking about the other aspects, including socio-economic and political aspects between India and Iran. And we look forward to have more collaborations in future with the Iran Culture House and other organizations that participated with us today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste to everyone.
Namaste, sir.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, namaskar, sabhi ko, and yes, have a great time with you all. Thank you all the participants, and Iran Culture House team. So I think we can leave the meeting. Can we?
Yeah, and shall I give the permission to Iran Culture House as the host?
Yes, yes, we can.
And then they can stop the meeting and all.
Yeah.
So is it this Iran Culture House which is recording it? Yeah, I'm giving the permission.
Yes, they are the ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've given.
Yeah.
So now they can wind up the session.
Yeah, it's a wonderful session, although exhaustive, but it's very wonderful.
The topics are interesting, so we couldn't
Very nice. We can,
realize.
Asuji, we can bring out a book on that also, editor volumes.
Yeah, we can. Let's see.
Very qualitative presentation. Very.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Take the photograph.
That we'll do it later on. So let's wind up here and then we will share whatever the decision is so that to the cultural ambassadors. So it's been a long time. Let's wind up. Anyways, thanks all. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Thank you, Pramodji.
Yeah, good night. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.
Special thanks to our coordinator, Isan Imam, Asuji, and
it was a teamwork, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the measures to take.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Mohanji also deserves a special thanks in coordinating so effectively, so efficiently also.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Means a lot. Okay. Let's have another meeting on our. Let's discuss a few things. Okay. So bye. I'm leaving the meeting now.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a great time.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone.
Yeah. Stay safe. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. You too.